All right. Welcome, everybody, to Standing for Truth. My name is Donnie Badinsky. I am your host and moderator for tonight's Creation versus Evolution debate showdown this Saturday night between Mark Reed and Brian Lauer. Gentlemen, I am pumped for this. I'm thrilled to have you both here. I know this is going to be a thought-provoking and engaging debate, and I'll tell you why. I am familiar with Mark Reed. I am familiar with Brian Lauer. They are no strangers here to the Standing for Truth debate platform, nor are they strangers to debates. And so I know they prep, and I know they are informed on the creation versus evolution topic. And so this should be a debate to remember, gentlemen. Specifically, what we are engaging is the proper perspective of the past. And I'm excited. So let's get acquainted before we get into opening statements, break the ice a little bit, get to know you gentlemen for anybody who might be new to these debates, new to this channel or the debate community. Mark, let's start with you. Certainly not your first time here, but it has been a while since you've been here. So Mark, please tell us how you've been. Tell us about yourself.
It's been a while. I missed you all. I'm Mark Reed. I am a secular humanist and atheist. I do love doing debate and I love talking with people about ideas. My main interests are sort of philosophy and theology, although I would call myself a counter-apologist. My focus is on morality and things like that. But I really love talking to people, and I'm going to really enjoy talking to Brian. Love to do science topics, just a whole wide array of things. But we have a really good community over at Mark Reed Atheism, full of secular humanists who believe in respect and dignity and all of that kind of thing. So if you do want a atheist perspective, come on over and we can sort of welcome you to the channel.
Mark, I appreciate that introduction. It's great to have you back. I do agree. I think this is going to be an excellent discussion. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch you two engage each other on this topic, especially in discussion. I appreciate both of your energy and also passion. And so Mark, thank you for that intro. For those in the audience who want to see more from Mark Reed, maybe they like what they're hearing, or they hear something that they want to object or challenge him on, he's always open to discussion. So have a look at his YouTube channel, which I have linked in the description box of this video. Brian Lauer, it is great to have you back as well. Not your first time here. Last time you were here, if I remember correctly, debate-wise, was your debate with Planet Peterson. Lots of fun. And also the hydroplate theory seminar. So Brian, how have you been? And tell us a little bit about yourself and your ministry.
I've been doing really well. And my big passion is to give people all the information so they can make informed decisions. And a lot of times that doesn't happen in our government, schools, museums, or media. And so if people don't see, both sides, they just memorize. So I'm here to give people an opportunity to think. And the ministry's been doing really well. I was able to get out to the Grand Canyon this year, so that was a lot of fun. And we did some hydroplate footage on that. So yeah, it's been a lot kind of neat seeing the doors that got opened. And it was nice to meet Mark tonight. It was a pleasure to meet him for sure.
All right. Well, Brian, I appreciate that introduction. Thank you to the both of you for helping us to get acquainted. For those that want to see more from Brian in a similar manner, if you like what you're hearing from Brian, or possibly he says something that you disagree with and you want to challenge and object to a few of his points, do check his YouTube channel linked in the description box of this video. Okay, Mark, Brian, allow me to go over the format and again, the resolution for tonight. And so what we are debating is this question: what is the proper perspective of the past, creation or evolution? Mark Reed takes the evolution position and Brian the creation viewpoint. Opening statement wise, we are going to start with Mark. Format, we've got 12-minute opening statements followed by an 8-minute rebuttal where our debaters get 8 minutes uninterrupted to respond to the points and arguments brought up in the opening statements. Then we'll jump into a roughly 40 to 45-minute discussion. And so rather than a strict cross-exam, our goal is to keep this free-flowing and organic. just engaging the topic tonight, creation or evolution. Then we've got 5-minute closing statements, good opportunity to wrap up our thoughts, wrap up our points, and address anything that has been left hanging up to that point, and essentially land the plane on our positions tonight, creation, evolution. Then this is where we get you guys in the audience involved. We're flexible on the Q&A, depends on how many questions come in. What we'll do is bump super chat questions to the top, as long as they're professional, as long as they're respectful. No attacking the debaters tonight. Please, if you're going to attack anything, it's arguments. But debaters, they have been gracious and generous with their time that they've given, not only for the debate itself, but all of the prep, the energy, the work that goes into the preparation for these debates. And so please show the debaters the respect that they've earned for tonight. And so tag me with your questions at Donnie or at Standing for Truth, and let me know who the question's for, Mark, Reed, or Brian. I like tonight's topic because it's more general, the proper perspective of the past, creation versus evolution. And so in many ways, there's a lot of topics we can discuss, and there's a lot of questions that you could ask. So let's have some fun with the Q&A. I always look forward to those. Okay, Mark, we are going to jump into our opening statements. Again, we've got 12 minutes, and you just let me know when you're ready, Mark. If you have slides or visuals.
Yeah, I'll just share them now. Hopefully I've gotten the right one and haven't completely mucked it up. Just tell me when you're ready to go.
I am ready. I see your screen sharing at the bottom. Did you want me to put that up for you?
Yep.
There you go.
Yeah, we're good. Okay, fantastic. I want to give a big thanks to Donnie. It's always great to be back at Standing for Truth. I've always enjoyed coming here for debates, and Don does a great job. And thank you so much for Brian for being my opponent today. So the topic of the debate, creationism. Hang on a second. Evolution versus creationism. Now, there is a subsection to this, which is the proper perspective of the past, and I totally do understand that is sort of the subsection. And I really want to talk about why we trust the scientific perspective, the mainstream scientific perspective, and that is because it seems to be the most sort of reliable way to evaluate what has happened in the past. And I'm going to outline the reasons for that. But first, I want to go over sort of what scientific actually is. So a definition of scientific is basically reliant on what science is. I know definitions are not prescriptive, but it gives us an idea of scientific is related to the scientific method. It's a branch of inquiry that falls under philosophy. Yes, everybody groan. I'm going to talk philosophy. Yeah, everybody get the groans out. That philosophy that science is a branch of is methodological naturalism. Methodological naturalism is an empirical process of investigating the natural world. Empirical, by the way, means that it can be validated by the senses. The scientific method does vary with its implementation, but they all follow this basic pattern: observation, research, hypothesis, testing, analysis, and reporting. Creationism does not follow this procedure and does not falsify or test or have any kind of scientific reporting mechanism in which to justify their beliefs as scientific or show any methodology that would fit this criteria. What's worse is that many of the claims that creationists sort of rely upon contains dogma or inerrant beliefs, ones that cannot be challenged, which is completely antithetical to the scientific methodology where everything can be challenged. So to be fair, there's something in science called demarcation, which is a gray area between what's science and what is not science. It's difficult to classify what falls into science and what falls into what is called pseudoscience, things that look like science but is not. Karl Popper writes extensively on falsifiability, which I'll talk about later. It's considered a hallmark of science. However, it's a bit nuanced. There are some classical scientific endeavors that might not meet that criteria, like ancient Chinese astrology, for instance. But Sean Rafferty made particularly astute observation that non-scientific statements will be backed by selected evidences removed from context. So I want to read this out because I think it has particular significance in this debate. The reason is because science must start with an observation of the world around us, which is not, unfortunately, what creationism does, which basically starts with a belief that is held and then reinforced by interpreting the science. First, creationism. firstly, is a belief in a transcendent God that created the universe ex nihilo, out of nothing, through supernatural means. Now, I'd assume my opponent is Christian. There can be many forms of creationism, and that's a joke. I know he's Christian. Muslim, Hindi creationism, even Wiccan and pagan creationism exists. I do bet that Brian probably dismissed these claims while pleading that his own is a special category of creationism. How does Brian falsify the other religious creationism which cannot be tested? How does Brian refute that Shiva is the creator of the universe? There's no real way to. He just dismisses it because he has no way to falsify it, which, as far as I'm concerned, all creationism has the same level of scientific evidence behind them, which is none whatsoever. I will explain why. So I want to touch on a principle that I mentioned earlier, falsifiability. It's known in science that untestable and unfalsifiable hypotheses are essentially not able to be graduated to scientific theory. Now, for example, I could claim an invisible, immaterial magic stone called the Blarney Stone is responsible for gravity. How would you disprove it? If I could fold in some of the knowledge of science, you would never, ever be able to prove me wrong. I could then point to it and say, aha, I gave an explanation. Explanation is a magic stone. You are doing nothing to show that I'm wrong. It can be replaced by a God easily. God did everything and you cannot show I'm wrong because God is omnipotent and could alter reality to fit with literally anything you discover in reality. This is kind of how pseudoscience works. Any newly discovered fact is simply claimed to fit within the pseudoscientist's claim because the claim can accommodate literally anything. We do see the same in the flat earth community, where seeing a 24-hour sun, for instance, is claimed to fit within the model, or it's a conspiracy or some other accommodation. Now, I just ran down what scientific evidence for creationism would be. It'd be making novel, new information, testable predictions that are presumably repeatable, experiments that show repeatability, and that's very important, and rigor regarding a hypothesis. Now, rigor is basically taking all possible explanations into account, which generally creationists don't do. The hypothesis being put forward must be testable as well. What isn't evidence for it? Evidence against any other explanation, natural or supernatural, that's not evidence for your explanation. Untestable or untested hypotheses that are unfalsifiable, I mentioned falsifiability earlier. Ad hoc explanations for observed phenomenon. Basically, you need to have something that shows the causal link between one thing to another, not just something that accounts for it. You have to show that one thing is actually causing the other. So I want to go into a few fallacies, and this is philosophy. Everybody groan, get it out of your system. Yes, yes, yes. I want to touch on this as this is the ad hoc explanations that we get from creationists. It shows a problem with critical thinking. Now, at face value, these statements under affirming the consequent, they seem logical, but they're not. So basically, it's like saying if my cat got into a fight, then it would have scratches. My cat has scratches, therefore it got into a fight. It ignores all the other ways that a cat could get scratches. It could have fallen off a roof, it could have run through a bush, it could have had something else happen. This is a case of just because you see something you expect does not necessarily mean that your suggested cause is correct. You need to show that causal link for what you're talking about. Another fallacy I want to go into is God of the gaps. This is a fallacious statement that appeals to someone not knowing or being ignorant in order to further your own position. Take this, for instance. A necklace is stolen and person A says, I think the maid did it, for absolutely no reason whatsoever. Maybe they're prejudiced towards the race of the person. When the person asked by person B how they know, person A says, well, who do you think stole it? And person B says, I don't know. Person A then says, aha, you don't know you don't know who stole it, so I am correct, it was the maid. This is a fallacy. You need to provide evidence for the maid, and other people not knowing does not provide that evidence. These are a few problems I want to go into for creationists. First one, speed of light. This is a massive problem. Dr. Danny Faulkner, who's a creationist scientist, said, changing the speed of light cannot be done, either in our galaxy, elsewhere in the universe. Physics would literally break down. The speed of light must remain a constant c, or that's the speed of light in a vacuum, approximately 300,000 kilometers per second. And there are physical laws which rely on this to be consistent. Atoms and molecules are governed by quantum mechanics. To change the speed of light would change the very principles of electromagnetism, and things would cease to exist or behave in some way we're unable to comprehend. It's interesting, though, we can slow light without changing its fundamental nature by going through ultra cold atoms to absorb and re-emit, but we can't get speed past c. The maximum speed, as per Einstein, is 300,000 kilometers a second approximately, or the speed of light in a vacuum. The heat problem. So a big shout out to Gutsep Gibbon for fantastic videos. There's a lot of things that contribute to the heat problem. There's volcanics, there's tectonics, there's all kinds of friction, and the main one is radioactive decay. As things decay through their parent to daughter elements, they throw out energy in the form of particles, alpha or beta or gamma particles. And basically those alpha or beta particles, those particles will cause heat. Now, in a few thousand years, that heat of all those decay would turn the Earth into a molten ball. It would just be molten. So the heat problem is a massive one for creationists. And just on the last point, I do want to go into just some stuff in the Bible that is really, I want to point out why creationism isn't scientific. This is genetics in the Bible. It's basically that Jacob, in order to get striped, speckled, or spotted sheep, tore a branch and then basically had the animals mate while looking at it. And that, made speckled, striped, or spotted sheep. Now, we know now that that isn't actually possible. That is not how genetics works, but this is something that is in the Bible. So, things like this really show that creationism based upon the Bible does not really have a foundation for being scientific, because the book itself is not scientific. But I think I'll wrap it up there. But thank you so much. At the end of the day, we need to follow the science. Science clearly says that the evolution is the correct method for evaluating the past. But I'll pass it back to Donnie, and we can go from there.
Mark, thank you very much for that first opening statement of tonight's Great Origins Debate Showdown. To the audience, I appreciate all of the interaction and engagement in our live chat. Reminder, we will be having an audience Q&A once we're done with our main sessions here, opening statements, rebuttals, a discussion, roughly 40 to 45 minutes, and then closing statements. So please, if you do have questions or challenges or even objections to what our debaters say throughout the debate, send those in the form of questions, and we'll have some fun interacting with those in the Q&A. Brian Lauer, we are going to reset the timer and hand it over to you for 12 minutes. Whenever you're ready, please let me know. If you need me to share your screen, I can do that as well.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Donnie, for lining this up. And thank you, Mark, for participating. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in tonight. And hopefully when it's all done, you can see information on both sides of the topic and other sources where you can go get more information. Because like I said before, I want people to get all the information to make informed decisions. And that's not happening in our schools, in our media, in our museums. So I'm giving everybody an opportunity to think, because if you only see one side of the issue, you just memorize. And you can go ahead and share that for me, if you would, Donnie. And we need to make some definitions. And according to the National Academy of Sciences, the National Academy of Sciences defines science as the use of evidence to construct testable explanations and predictions of natural phenomena, as well as the knowledge generated through this process. So notice the key word, it's testable. If it's not testable, according to the National Academy of Sciences, it's not science. And I'm paying for this textbook with my property tax, so I'm going to use this definition. I'm also paying for this, evolution. All life on Earth is related to a common ancestor that existed about 3.8 billion years ago. This process is called evolution. So when I say evolution, I'm not talking about big beaks or little beaks or changes in the genome. I'm talking about all of the plants and animals and people that have ever lived coming from a single living cell, a common ancestor. And we need to separate the facts from the conclusion. This is from a science college textbooks that I bought. It says a fact is a verifiable piece of information, whereas a conclusion is a judgment based upon the facts. Okay, so a fact is verifiable. Okay, tonight we got the same facts. What we're discussing is the conclusion, the interpretation of the facts. So we have to be very careful about separating those. And then this next statement, it's the ultimate pot calling the kettle black. The news media, often mix facts with conclusions without indicating which is which. Well, so does the science book, and so does the science journals, giant science journals, and so does this national park website. Notice at the bottom it says the park dominated The park is dominated by the spectacular Grand Canyon, a twisting 1 mile and 1 mile deep and 277-mile long gorge. Okay, that's verifiable, so that's a fact. And then they throw the conclusion in with it. This is an interpretation based upon the fact, but it's not a fact. It says formed during some 6 million years of geologic activity and erosion by the Colorado River. Okay, so that's not verifiable. That's not testable. Okay, so that's a conclusion, and they mixed it with the facts. That's what we're going to have to get good at tonight. And even NOVA does it. Paleobiologist Mary Schweitzer has defied the long-held belief that it is fruitless to search for preserved soft tissue in dinosaur remains. Most experts thought that such structures would have decayed and vanished long ago, and rightfully so, because that's what all their scientific experiments show. But Schweitzer has found evidence of delicate structures such as blood vessels and red blood cells. Now, that's a fact. That's verifiable. We can see that. And then they throw their conclusion in. The blood cells that have survived for millions of years. Okay, that's not a fact. That's a judgment. They could have just as well thrown mind judgment in there. The blood vessels and red blood cells, that indicates that dinosaurs did not live millions of years ago. So what you're going to see tonight is we have the same facts. It's just, how do we interpret them? That's what the difference is. And we're going to be looking at evidence. Let's take a look at high confidence evidence. This is repeatable and testable, and it's directly observable. It's prospective, and it's careful to avoid bias. And you do that by doing blind tests, or even better yet, double blind tests. And it's careful to avoid assumptions. The fewer assumptions you make, the stronger your theory is. And the more accurate predictions you make, the more robust your theory is. And then it makes reasonable claims. Now, low confidence evidence is not testable. It's not repeatable. Nobody saw it, and it's looking backwards. And there's clear opportunities for bias. And one of the biggest biases is to eliminate any opposing ideas. That would be a methodological naturalism, where they say all there is matter and energy. That's all you're allowed to think in. You got to stay in this material box. And so they eliminate everything else. And if that's the only horse in the race, of course they're going to get all the grant funding. Okay, and then there's many assumptions that are required, and then overstated claims. Okay, so what's an example of high confidence evidence? That would be, how fast does an object fall? You can test it. You can repeat it. You can observe it. You can do it over and over and over again. And if you make a reasonable claim, it's like, this is how fast it falls. That's high confidence. What's low confidence? Do humans and bacteria share genes from a common ancestor? Well, that's not testable. That's not repeatable. That you haven't seen. And there's no respect. You're looking backwards, and there's bias there. One of the biases is there's no God. So now it just has to be from a common ancestor. And there's many assumptions and also many rescuing devices. And the more rescuing devices there are, that's something that's imagined to be true. That can't happen. Okay, and so now we're going to make claims tonight, like this one is in a textbook. Organisms as dissimilar as humans and bacteria share genes inherited from a very distant common ancestor. So is this high confidence, testable, observable? No, this is low confidence. And so that's what I'm going to try, and tonight I'm going to try and stay in the high confidence side of the evidence. And if you want to learn more about this, Dr. Rob Stadler, he wrote the book, The Scientific Approach to Evolution. And I'm going to give people sources tonight so you can learn on your own. You can go onto YouTube's TCCSA, and you can listen to them talk about it. And other things. It's broken up into biology, astronomy, geology, and you can see what creationists say on those things. And then now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Miracles. These are things that violate laws of physics, and everybody believes in it because everybody needs to get matter from nothing, violates the first law of thermodynamics. Order from chaos violates the second law. Life from non-life violates the law of biogenesis. Immaterial ideas from matter, that's Einstein's gulf that he said was unbridgeable. And consciousness from matter, which I don't think I've seen anybody try to explain. So let's just look in the third one. How did life begin? Was it by blind chance, or was it by creation? And this is what the college textbook says, to the best of our knowledge. It should say, to the best of our knowledge, based on a blind chance perspective of the past. And it goes down and says, somehow, despite this harsh environment, living organisms appeared. So they don't have a clue how it started. Somehow is not science. It should not be in a science book. That's definitely not testable. And if you go up there, it says that it rained on hot rock for millions of years. And that's what happened before somehow. So technically, if you believe in blind chance, you believe that we came from rock. Okay, and they haven't started. You can get $10 million. All you have to do is solve the largest mystery in history, how genetic code inside cells got there, and how cells intentionally self-organize, communicate, then purposefully adapt. And so let's take a look at what's happening inside our cell.
Now we see the polymerase in action from the outside as it spits out the messenger RNA transcript. Next, this RNA transcript approaches and passes through a molecular machine called the nuclear pore complex, an information recognition device that controls the flow of information in and out of the cell's nucleus.
So did that get there by blind chance, or do you think that was created? And we can do
Now
the
we see the genetic assembly instructions on the messenger RNA approaching and arriving at a two-part chemical factory called a ribosome, the site of protein synthesis.
And we could do all night on that, just what's happening in a cell. But you can see this on YouTube, Discovery Science, and its journey inside the cell. And then where did that information recognition device come from? And you guys can vote in the chat. Was it A, blind chance, or B, creation? This can be interactive. And how about kinesin?
Cells are full of specialized components that perform functions vital to their existence. But how do these components get to the right locations inside the cell to perform their functions? For larger components, a transportation system is needed. Meet the kinesin. Masterpieces of microengineering, kinesins are miniature motorized machines that carry cargo from one part of the cell to another, walking along self-assembling highways called microtubules.
It's like, what? They get there by self-assembling highways? Well, how do those highways know where to bring that stuff? Is that by chance? And so you can vote. It's like, and my son saw that. It's like, well, where do they get the energy to move? That's ATP synthase.
ATP synthase is a high-tech micromolecular power generator inside the cells of your body. It generates adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, an energy molecule that provides fuel that every one of your cells needs to function. Without this fuel, your cells will cease operation, and so will you.
So without the fuel, your cells cease operation, and so will you. So you're going to die without this. My question is, how did we live before this evolved? And notice the multiple parts working together with precision timing.
ATP synthase machine has many parts we recognize from human-designed technology. A rotor, a stator, a drive shaft, and other basic components of a rotary engine. The ATP synthase is one of thousands of elegantly designed molecular machines inside your cells that make your life and all known life possible.
So this is just one of thousands of your cells, and that's happening trillions of times over in your body right now. Is that happening by chance, or was it created? And they slow it way down. It's not like that. It looks real slow, but it's not. Check this out. And this is on Discovery Science. You can check that out.
It doesn't look all that complicated until you realize it looks more like this. In this, it's slowed down by more than 10-fold. And the cell membrane is so densely packed with these machines, they effectively make the entire surface of the membrane.
Yeah. And so did that happen by chance? And the average human uses a billion trillion ATP molecules every second. And that's your entire body weight of ATP every day. So you stay alive. And again, how did you live before that? And so where did that ATP come from? Go ahead and vote. Do you think that's blind chance? We're just lucky as can be that all those things are going to the right place at the right time to keep you alive? Or do you think there was a creator, a creation involved? And so real quickly, we're talking about the proper perspective of the past. Is it by blind chance or is it creation? See, I went even farther. You know, it's the Big Bang. People think that the universe got here by chance, and other people think humans got here by chance. That's the Big Bang and evolution. I just loop them together and call them blind chancers. We talked about science. It needs to be testable. Evolution, we're talking about common ancestors. And we really need to separate the facts from the conclusions. Facts are verifiable. And Mark and I, we got the same facts, but we have different conclusions. And then we have to look at what evidence is being supplied. Is it high confidence? Is it testable? Or is it low confidence? Is it just imagined? And then we're going to look at the miracles and then the complexity of the cell, and then also the sources. And then I'm also encouraging, I think that we should have multiple theories that people should look at so people can think. And that's the other thing. So I encourage you to get a pen and paper and just write down the sources so that you can go out and check it out and make a really good informed decision. And that includes, you got to see both sides if you want to think. And that's not happening in class. So thank you so much for Donnie for putting this together. And thanks again, Mark, for getting up in the morning and talking to us from Australia. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
Brian Lauer, thank you very much for your opening statement. Gentlemen, your roughly 12-minute opening statements any time not used. Mark, that coffee looks good. You are in the future in the morning, so I appreciate you getting up to do this, as Brian said.
Oh,
Gentlemen,
my pleasure.
12-minute opening statements gave us plenty of points and arguments for our positions tonight. Again, creation and evolution, to now rebut and respond to in a rebuttal. Rebuttal wise, we have 8 minutes each. Before I hand it to you, Mark, I will let the audience know that I am all caught up on your questions. Again, I really appreciate the engagement and interaction, and I've bumped super chat questions to the top for a guaranteed reading for our debaters. Okay, Mark, we are going to reset the timer, and I will start it again. You've got 8 minutes. I'll start it on your first word. Go ahead.
Fantastic. Thank you. So when you're talking about schools and museums and things like that, they don't go into creationism. That's because it's not science. Like, don't get me wrong. In theology, you can teach whatever you want, but science has a very specific structure. The phylogenetic tree that you showed, I'm not sure I have any problem with it, but you seem to just be incredulous that could have happened. It doesn't seem to be any reason apart from your incredulity. A fact is a commonly agreed upon thing. It's not really sort of this, oh, well, things are automatically facts and things automatically aren't. Scientific facts are ones that are held by as true by the entirety of the scientific community. So this sort of idea that facts are this thing out there, I'm not sure why we would be saying that. The Grand Canyon, now I don't understand how switchbacks would have formed, how it would have formed so quickly. Maybe you can take us through that. But you just sort of said, no, it's not true. It's formed in 6 million years. Didn't really say why. Mary Schweitzer believes in deep time. She says that, hey, iron can cause some of these structures. And I do want to note that it wasn't the cells that survived, it was the structures that survived, which isn't exactly the same thing. But she sort of says, hey, it does not disprove an old Earth kind of thing. So I would take the person researching it. You talked about fewer assumptions, that's Occam's razor, but those fewer assumptions have to like account for everything. And that's the problem with Occam's razor. You sort of had rescuing devices. I don't know how to get a bigger rescuing device than a supernatural being that can do literally anything. Any kind of problem with it seems to be, well, I'm just going to appeal to the supernatural omnipotence of this being in order to overcome that. It's very, very strange to me because that seems like a massive rescuing device. You sort of said, these things aren't testable, observable. They actually are. Like things like endogenous retroviruses, we can see how they interact with us currently and apply that to what happened in the past. So some things are testable and repeatable. And as we find more fossils, as we find more things, as we do more testing, as Lenski Labs does more experiments in evolution, we are testing and we are repeating those tests. So I'm not sure what you're talking about there. So when you said matter from nothing kind of thing, I don't know what you're talking about really. Nothing, as Lawrence Krauss's universe from nothing is talking about a place, so sort of something with no space, time, matter, or energy. So that's what but there was still a quantum foam there. So it's not literally no thing, philosophical, nothing. It's just no space, time. So yeah, matter from a quantum field. Yes, that would work. It's not blind chance, it's deterministic. So when you're talking about these things like accretion disks, for instance, when all of the matter around the gravity of an object sort of piles up and then makes a planet or a body or a moon or something, it's not blind chance. There is physics involved, which is deterministic. So it's sort of like you just want to say, hey, it just happened randomly, and that's not really accurate. Deterministic is the word you want. ATP synthase, there's also other types. There's gluonase synthase. There's guanosine phosphorate. There's certain bacteria and archaea that don't use ATP synthesis. So yes, there are very, very few, but they are out there. So that may just be a gap in your sort of knowledge of biology. As I said, you sort of say you want to mix it into blind chance or creationism, and that's a false dichotomy, right? That's basically saying hey, it's one or the other when it could be a deterministic selection process, like that is powered by blind chance, but it actually has a selection mechanism. And speaking of selection mechanisms, there's a lot of like different hypotheses on where the cell came from. And my favorite is amyloid world moving into RNA world. It's a bit different, but those can, all you need is a selection and a replication process. That's all you need to get it running. But we're talking so long ago, it's very hard to tell. And that's not a theory because nobody knows. There's a lot of different hypotheses about it. And I think that's about it. But when you sort of say, hey, this should be taught as a theory, creationism should be taught as a theory, in order to graduate to a theory, it's got to undergo falsification process. Like, how would you falsify this is really the big question I have. Like, you have a hypothesis that God did all of this. Fine, cool. How do you falsify that? And I think I'll leave it there. That's about all.
Mark, thank you very much for that rebuttal. What I will do is reset the timer and hand it back to Brian. Brian, whenever you're ready, you also have up to 8 minutes for a rebuttal. Just let me know when you're good to go, and I'll start your timer. Also, make sure to unmute when you're ready to speak.
All right, here we go. Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if Mark understands who brought us the founding fathers of science are, like Newton and Kepler and Pasteur and Babbage. I mean, they brought us stuff like bacteriology, calculus, celestial mechanics, and chemistry, and electromagnetics. And they, so they believed in the Bible, and they were trying to figure out God's ways and how He did it. And now you can't even think about what's in the Bible. And actually, Matthew Murray, because of the Bible that said that there's paths in the sea, he said, well, if God says there's paths in the sea in Psalm 8, I'm going to go out and find them. And he did. And he found the ocean currents, and it saves the shipping industry billions of dollars. And so, to say that it's not created is just to think that all that got together by deterministic or whatever. How all those incredible things in that ATP is just happening. They're just determined to get that way. Well, who determined that they get that way? And then we do make predictions. The hydroplates made several predictions, and there's a whole bunch of them that they accurately predicted what's in an asteroid, what's in a comet. And NASA, with their billions of dollars, they have egg in their face every time they get more videos, more information from the James Webb Space Telescopes. And now it's gotten so bad that Jason Lyle, he goes, you know what, their predictions are wrong. And when they find out that they're wrong, I predict that they're going to say that galaxies formed much sooner than expected. And he was right on both sides. And my point is, how did things get here? It is, and it's not a false dichotomy. Either the universe was designed or it wasn't. It's this determination thing. Well, who determined how it would get here? I don't understand that one. And if it is a dichotomy, either it was designed or it wasn't. And, if you have a third one, I guess I am willing to listen to it, but if it is a dichotomy, then evidence against one is for another one. Okay. And we have made accurate predictions in the past. Russell Humphrey, he accurately predicted the magnetic field of Uranus and Neptune before they got out there. And he based it on a 6,000-year model. And he also accurately predicted the diffusion rate of hydrogen, or was it helium, out of zircons on a 6,000-year model. And he was right. It was way, the billions of year model didn't work at all. And then even Ann Gibbons, she says that the mutation rate, that mitochondria Eve goes back 6,000 years, but she has to be an evolutionist. So she had to throw something else after that. They threw in the other things. And I'll just give you some quotes. This is from Thomas Nagel. He's an atheist, and he taught he's a professor. And he said that, and this is a headline, "What's gotten into Thomas Nagel? Leading atheist branded a heretic for daring to question Darwinism." Yeah, you start questioning Darwinism, just ask Dr. Gonzalez at Iowa State, there's volumes of people. You kick the sacred cow, you're going to be out on your ear. But it goes on to say, all he did was argue in a new book and this is the new book of Mind and Cosmos. All he did was argue in a new book, the evolutionary view of nature is false. And now grand forces have descended upon him. He argues modern Darwinianism offers a dogmatic system of thought, and that's true, that is intoxicating precisely because it offers the illusion of freeing us from religion. And I realize such doubts will strike many people as outrageous, but that is because almost everyone in our secular culture has been browbeaten into regarding the reductive research program about the origin of life as sacrosanct, on the ground that anything else would not be science. And that's what you're hearing tonight. It's got to be just matter and energy, or it's not science. And then Mind and Cosmos argues the modern scientific story of the origin of life through evolution is ripe for displacement, and I agree. And it represents a heroic triumph of ideological theory over common sense, which will be seen as laughable in a couple of generations. They're going to think like, how could you believe everything came from a pond scum? Okay, in the present climate of dominant scientific naturalism, heavy dependent on speculative Darwinian explanations of practically everything, and armed to the teeth against attacks from religion, I have thought it useful to speculate about possible alternatives, and they did not like it at all. You know, and if the materialistic neo-Darwinian orthodoxy contradicts common sense, then this is a mark against orthodoxy, not against common sense. I mean, is it common sense that ATP synthase just got together? I mean, a painting had a painter, a building had a builder, you know, a creation had a creator. You know, to think a creation didn't have a creator just breaks, it's illogical, in my opinion. When a chain of reasoning leads us to deny the obvious, we should double check the chain of reasoning before we give up on the obvious. You know, it's highly implausible that life as we know it is the result of a sequence of physical accidents together with the mechanism of natural selection. And he says materialism is, as Nagel suggests, self-evidently absurd. And I agree. You know, it's just materialism. It's just matter. I mean, how does matter make information? Our DNA is full, just chock full of information, and that got together by chance. Okay, Mind and Cosmos can be read as the extended paraphrase of Orwell's famous insult. One has to belong to the intelligentsia to believe things like that. No ordinary man could be such a fool. You know, it's like nothing turned into everything. You know, when you start with nothing plus nothing times nothing equals everything, there's no amount of mistakes you're going to come to. Okay, and the positive mission Nagel undertakes in Minded Cosmos is to outline consciously a possible third way. So maybe there is a third way, but the one that's there does not work. Okay, a materialist who lived his life according to his professed convictions, understanding himself to have no moral agency at all, seeing his friends and enemies and families as genetically determined robots, would just be wouldn't be just materialistic, he'd be a psychopath. And that's what Jeffrey Dahmer said. You know, he said if evolution, and he believed in evolution, he just believed that everybody came from pond scum, and if there's no God, why try to fit in? You know, where does right and wrong come from? And then this is, you can share this one if you want there, Donnie. This is from Scientific American. Psst, don't tell the creationists, but scientists don't have a clue how life began. They don't have a clue. You know, there's $10 million on the table. You know, DNA can make neither proteins nor copies of itself without the help of a catalyst proteins called enzymes. This fact turned the origin of life into the classic chicken or egg puzzle. Which came first, proteins or DNA? But the RNA world hypothesis remains problematic. RNA and its components are difficult to synthesize under the best of conditions in a laboratory, let alone under the plausible prebiotic conditions. And so Francis Crick, he came up with panspermia. Okay, and that's where he says it came from outer space, and that's laughable in my opinion. And Francis Crick? Oh yeah, where is he? Yeah, oh, that's the wrong one. But yeah, Francis Crick. He says you have to look at let's see right here, Francis Crick. Okay, this is what he says. You know, biologists must constantly keep in mind what they see was not designed, but rather evolved. Why would they have to constantly keep reminding themselves? Because it's overwhelming. Everything was designed, but they have to keep hitting themselves in the face saying, no, it wasn't, no, it wasn't, no, it wasn't. And clearly it was. And this is from Life Itself. An honest man, armed with the knowledge available to us now, could only state that in some sense, the origin of life appears to be at the moment almost a miracle. And I would agree, it is a miracle. In science, all we see is life comes from life. That's all we've ever seen. And so I would say that our life came from an eternal life giver. That makes sense. You know, the first cause, there's a law of causality. You want to talk about science, you know, every effect had a cause, and the effects, and some of the effects can never be greater than the cause. Well, I got a question. What caused the universe? Whatever caused the universe has to be bigger than the universe. And I would say a supernatural creator can make a natural creation. And there, once you allow for that, you don't break any laws of physics. You don't have to break the law of second law, where everything's supposed to get better, and all we see in life is everything falling apart. And then it goes on to down at the bottom. This is what's really, happening. The ultimate aim of the modern development of biology is, in fact, to explain all biology in the terms of physics and chemistry. And that's what Mark's doing tonight. He's explaining it all in physics and chemistry. Well, where did information come from? Information always comes from an intelligence. And so, yeah, it's very, very interesting. Very interesting.
10 seconds, Brian. Oh, Brian, I think you just accidentally muted yourself. And what we'll do is end the rebuttal there because we are a little bit over time. And so let's bring Mark back in. And okay, gentlemen, Brian, you accidentally muted yourself, I believe, at the end there. And so just make sure to unmute before we get into our discussion.
Yeah, it was all done. That's what I did. I clicked out, and then it cut me off. So thank you.
No worries. You guys are doing good. You guys are great sports. I appreciate the energy and the information so far that we now get to interact with in an open discussion. And so as I went over in the beginning, the open discussion will be more free-flowing and organic rather than a strict cross-exam. And some ground rules. I want to make sure as moderator that you're both given more than enough time to make your points, finish your thoughts. We'll limit interruptions, but allow for healthy interruptions, clarifying questions, things like that. Let's just be cognizant that we want to give each other that time that's necessary to make our arguments and provide rebuttals. So, okay, Mark, Brian, what we'll do is hand it to Mark to pick the first topic or to basically kick off the discussion, since Brian, you just ended with your rebuttal. Gentlemen, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I want to talk about sort of hydroplate because you mentioned it a few times, and sort of sure. And so hydroplate, as far as I understand it, is the idea that there are sort of almost like tectonic plates, but it floats around on water kind of thing. How did you validate that hypothesis?
I would say with accurate predictions. It accurately predicted. Right. It accurately predicted what they'd find in comets, what they'd find in asteroids. It accurately predicted that asteroids would have moons, which was thought to be impossible, and now 17% of them have moons. And it accurately predicted that they'd find water underneath major mountains. And it accurately predicted that they'd find stuff in comets that was made at scalding hot water, high temperatures. And it accurately predicted that asteroids would be floating rock piles. And NASA made a big blunder.
Yeah, Brian, I'm not sure if you know, but they're essentially dirty snowballs. Like, there's the Rosetta mission. That's basically the composition is water, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide. It's not sort of, the hydroplate doesn't account for the volatile components.
Well, sure it does. Yeah, because they didn't know what was in a comet. They did the Stardust mission back in 2004, and Pastor Kevin Lee, he was face-to-face with Dr. Brownlee, who was a NASA scientist, and he was saying, you're going to find stuff from the Earth in that comet. And Brownlee says, now we're going to find stuff from the outer solar system. That is where the comets come from the Oort cloud. And he was shocked to find stuff he had to reluctantly say it came from the inner solar system. And so the HPT guys were right and NASA was wrong. And then he emailed the same guy and he said, if you ever try to redirect an asteroid, it'll work if it's a solid rock, but if it's a bunch of loosely held pile of rocks, boulders, it's going to fail. And that's what happened. The DART mission, now there's 37 or 38 boulders coming at us because they thought it was a solid rock. And this theory predicts that it would be a flying rock pile. And so that's 2 for hydroplate and 2 against NASA.
Okay. Just a second, because I don't think you're sort of characterizing that correctly. That we sort of said, hey, the elements in the comet are from the early stages of the solar system. I don't think we said they were from Earth. So you think that these comets have somehow gathered material from Earth, so they originated on Earth?
Yes.
How did they get up there?
Because the subterranean water, which was full of supercritical water, which was under 372,000 pounds per square inch, when the fountains of the Great Deep broke up, it made a crack. It cracked the crust, and it went around the Earth in 2 or 3 hours. And the water just went up just exploded out of that crack. And could you
How do you
imagine
know that?
what?
How do you know that?
That's what the Dr. Walt Brown, he did all the math for it. I'm not a scientist, but he is. So I'm telling
Okay.
people what he came up with. And that much force would eject stuff up into outer space. And then he accurately predicted what they'd find in it.
I don't think, like, to get the necessary escape velocity for that size object, it would require enough force to presumably crack the crust. Like, you're really talking
Well,
about
it did. It did crack the crust. The crust wasn't broken into plates like it is today. That's the force that broke it into plates. And then the mark of it, they say, bro, Brian, if that happened, wouldn't it leave a mark? And it's like, yeah, it's the mid-oceanic ridge. It's a 46,000 mile mountain range at the bottom of the ocean that's made by stretching it in two directions. And it's the mid-oceanic ridge.
Instead of the sort of subduction and induction zones that we still
Right.
see today that are actually, you know, we can tell that, say, for instance, the Indian plate is still moving north into the Asian plate at, like, I think it's like 1 inch per year or something ridiculously slow. You think that instead of that process occurring and convection currents causing the plates to move, that a sufficient amount of pressure under the earth to send tons and tons and tons of rock material in, like, not just into orbit, not just into escape velocity, but shooting it throughout the entire solar system, caused by water. Do you have any evidence to back up this, alleged incident that caused them to break? What do you actually have to back that up?
Serpentine on asteroid Bennu. It's formed when water touches the mantle. And who was it? Astro Alexandra. She showed it, and she showed a map of, guess what? The mid-oceanic ridge, where she said that this material came from. And she says it must have been some watery planet. And we're saying, yeah, it was Earth. So it was serpentine in asteroid Bennu that points directly. The more they find out about what's out in outer space, the more it looks like scientists work for a Walt Brown, which is an axiom. You know, all scientists work for Walt Brown, because when they find something new, it's like, yeah, well, that's explained by the hydroplate theory. And this
yes,
theory,
but serpentine is just a type of rock. It doesn't necessarily mean it originated on Earth, right? It can originate in all kinds of other places. And I might add,
a watery planet.
Sure.
A watery planet, is what she said. And her government school education wouldn't even let her think that it could be Earth.
And due to the sort of glacial marks on Mars, we thought there might be water on Mars at some point. And there are some moons around, I think around Jupiter, that does have liquid water on it. So it isn't just, oh, well, Earth is the only place with water, so that's where it had to come. And I sincerely doubt in any way the sort of audacious claim that enough pressure to shoot these comets out can be generated without completely destroying the Earth. Like, it seems nonsensical, and I don't see any kind of reason to believe it.
Well, I suggest that you would look into it, look at what Walt Brown says, and see and get his book. I mean, this is the hydroplate theory. It's got 600 pages. You know, it's you can download it on let's see, rsr.org/HPT, Real Science Radio, rsr.org/HPT. Okay. You can get a PDF, and I encourage you to go through it. And again, it's got source after source. And this guy, he's got a PhD from MIT, and he ran the Benet military lab. So he's one of the sharpest minds in America. I think of him as the Isaac Newton of our day. And the more and more that he discovers, and he crunched the numbers, he got his PhD from MIT in mechanical engineering in the heat transfer lab. So he would know if it would get too hot or not. And this is what he comes up with. And it explains inland seas like the Gulf of Mexico, where there's a whole bunch of salt down there, and also Mediterranean, where there's a whole bunch of salt down there, and these big salt domes that can be higher than Mount Everest is. And it's how did that salt get there? But it explains it.
Okay, Brian, you're kind of going through topic after topic after topic. I sort of want to stick to one at a time instead of going too many.
But you asked for things that validate the hydroplate, and I'm telling you things that validate the hydroplate.
It's interesting that you sort of bring up Newton, because you mentioned him before, and Newton, like incredible genius, he also believed in alchemy and thought he could turn lead into gold. Obviously failed completely because it's not possible. But just because you're intelligent doesn't mean that you're correct about things.
Well,
You've got to have a methodology to actually. But what I want to ask is,
we still use his formula in physics, his gravity formula. We still use it.
Sure, but we
Right.
don't
So
use
he did
alchemy.
something right, you know.
Yes,
You know, he did,
just
he
because
did
you get
something
one
right.
thing right, this
And
is
so what
called
are
an
we
appeal to
using?
authority.
What
Brian,
are we
Guys,
Brian,
we're a
this
little
is
bit across. I just want to make sure that the audience is hearing all the points being made. Mark, feel free to finish your thoughts, and then Brian will
Yeah.
throw it right back.
It's called an appeal to authority. You're basically saying, hey, because this guy was right about this, he must be right about everything else. And that's not the case, right? That is not the case. We base it upon evidence and the sort of strength of that argument and the evidence of that hypothesis, rather than what somebody got right somewhere else or whether somebody was intelligent. I'm just pointing that out.
Right, but it's more than that. He's making accurate predictions and they're being validated by NASA. What's Darwin done? You know, what things has Darwin stood by that we still use today? You know, natural selection and survival of the fittest. You have to sterilize the unfit like we did in the 1920s. 70,000 people were sterilized because they needed to get, because it wasn't good to let the weak people reproduce based on Darwinian evolution. And so that's
hold on. Darwin did not do that. And for a start, Darwin got things wrong. He got a lot of things right, but he got a lot of things wrong.
What did he get right?
That was people basing it upon their work in Germany at the time. So you know, that wasn't
in America,
because they misinterpreted a theory doesn't mean that it's his fault. Number one. Number two, he got a lot of things right, but he didn't even have any idea of what genetics were. There must be some way to transfer information, but he didn't know what it was. So we got a lot of things wrong. So the idea that we're still appealing to Darwin is a mistake, because we're not. We're appealing to the mountains of evidence that has been done on evolution ever since. And as I said before, I think that sort of now that we've got genetics and things like endogenous retroviruses and their hierarchy throughout the nested hierarchy of the phylogenetic tree, I think we really do have sort of, you know, pinpointed exactly how evolution has sort of put these through.
Well, I would question, what do we still use from Darwin? You know, you say we don't use anything from Newton. Well, the theory, but it doesn't work.
I didn't say that. I didn't say we don't use anything from Newton. I'm saying just because he was right on calculus and he did some fantastic things and was a genius doesn't mean we should believe him on everything, like alchemy and turning lead into gold. That's what I said. So please don't mischaracterize me.
All right. Yeah.
Well, I also think that sort of, how would you falsify this hydroplate theory? How would you falsify it?
That's a good question. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's making accurate predictions. You don't seem to care about them. You know, it's
well, I don't think they're accurate. From what I'm reading here, like they did not predict it accurately at all. There was complex organic molecules which they didn't predict.
Where did those come from? Where did those organic? They find stuff from Earth in the comets.
And sure. And you mentioned asteroid Bennu as well. You find, you know, uracil, all of the components for DNA and RNA in there, all of the base molecules for it in there. Chirality is left and right-handed. It doesn't have a certain chirality that we're used to on Earth, but they're all there. So where did they come from? I don't know.
So if you saw a building, if you saw a bunch of lumber, like after a tornado, you saw walls and you saw 2x4s and roofs and cement with rebar coming out of it, would you think that those things were getting put together to build a building? Or would you think that that was a building that was destroyed? And what you find in the asteroids is life that was destroyed. Those are not becoming life. Those are building blocks of a destroyed life.
How do you know that?
Well, common sense.
Well, why is there an opposite chirality then? Why is there right-handed chirality on there?
Well, that'll happen. It goes back to a 50-50 mix as it's dead.
But everything on Earth is left-handed, right?
When it's alive, and that's a tough one for blind chancers. How do you get everything right-handed for proteins, or left-handed for proteins, and right-handed for DNA? How do you do that by chance? I mean, if you get one
Well,
in there that's wrong, then it doesn't work. And so from a blind chance perspective, chirality points to a creator, not blind chance.
no, it's just selection mechanisms. That's all.
What is
But
selecting? What is your selector? Who selects? Who's your selector?
what do you mean who selects? I'm not sure what you mean by that.
You said, well, chirality, that's just a selector
Yeah.
mechanism. I'm asking, well, who
Yeah.
is the selector? Who selects the
Yeah.
left and the
So,
right?
for instance, like we've got a number of hypotheses, right? We've got a number of ideas of how it may happen. Say, take
From a-
amyloid world, right? I mentioned it
from a-
earlier, amyloid world. That basically the folded proteins, if it doesn't have that chirality, it will not fold correctly. It will not actually
Exactly.
go into there.
Exactly.
Okay, so the
that's what-
only ones that actually get replicated is the ones that fold correctly.
Right, and the other ones will be destroyed. And there's a lot more
Yes.
ways for it to go wrong than to go
Mhm.
right.
But that doesn't matter. All you need is replication and selection, and it has both of those. Now, we don't know for sure that's what happened, Brian. I want to make that clear.
Right,
I'm not saying,
right.
hey, this is what
So-
happened,
so
but it
that-
is one hypothesis from amyloid
Right,
world to
right.
RNA world to DNA that shows
Right.
that, hey, there is at least a alternative explanation of where life came from, that it's not constrained by any of these things. But I'd like to really ask you,
Well, wait a
how do
minute.
you
Wait a minute. One point at a time.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. And so if they aren't selected and it's one, oh shoot, you lost my point. Okay, we were talking about chirality, and you said that you don't know how it happened. So how is that not an I don't know of the gaps? You could accuse us of being God of the gaps. How is that not I don't know of the gaps?
What do you mean? I don't know. You do realize that a God of the gaps is where somebody doesn't know, and you say, well, you don't know how it happened, therefore
Well,
God.
that's
What
what
we're
you think.
doing is we're becoming cautious, and we're saying, hey, we've got a hypothesis. You've got your God hypothesis, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
instead of saying, hey, because I've got a God hypothesis and you can't show me it didn't happen like that, then it is correct. That's God of the gaps, or argument from incredulity, I guess. But we're saying, hey, we've got this hypothesis, but we can't actually see if that is correct until we can test it. So we're going to reserve that, promoting that to a theory until we're sure that it is correct. One of us is being very cautious about, what they put across as what we know for sure, and one of us isn't. Because you basically say, hey, a God did it, but you can't actually give any evidence that that is the case.
Can you tell me how information comes from matter?
What do you mean?
Information science. Information always comes from intelligence, and you're telling me there is no intelligence. So can you tell me how information comes from matter, from non-life, from non-intelligence?
Does God have information?
Yes.
So it must come from some other intelligence, right?
Well, no, God's all-knowing, all-powerful. So he can write a DNA code because he's smart enough.
Wait, hold on a second. You said that information always comes from an intelligence. And then when I sort of pointed out, well, if God's got information, it must have come from an intelligence. You're saying his own, but that's the information. So you're sort of giving special pleading. You're sort of going, hey, if we've got information, it must have come from a higher power. But then there's God who has information, but that doesn't come from a higher power. It's all
because
self-contained.
God's at the top of the heap. He's eternal. But you're saying you're saying that
special pleading.
You're saying that this information, which is a gazillion times more complex than Microsoft, and you're saying that just happened. That just happened by chance without any intelligence, and you have a commitment to natural material, methodological naturalism, where you won't allow for God. I'm asking you, why not? Would you consider a designer?
Well, methodological naturalism is science. Like it
not
natural.
Not according to my science book. My science book says science is testable. Can you show me a
philosophy of science says that methodological naturalism is science. So look, it can lead to a God. There's nothing preventing science leading to a God, but really we have to observe the natural world around us. That's essentially what it means. And we need a methodology that deals with the natural world, because we can't implement a methodology that deals with the supernatural. If you do have a methodology that reliably tests the supernatural, I would love to hear it, but we don't have that.
Do you think that your engine in your car came about by chance?
No, I know someone built that.
Good. How about the DNA in your
Yes.
body? DNA in your
I
body.
don't know that
So
someone
your
built
engine,
that.
your engine couldn't have came about by chance, but your DNA could have.
So you're
That
sort of
seems-
making
that
a
seems
category
consistent.
error in sort of saying, hey, we've got these things that are designed,
Yeah.
and because this is complex as well, it must be designed.
Yes.
But complexity is not a hallmark of the design, as any
Well, I would say
engineer will tell you.
sophistication.
Simplicity is the hallmark of
Right.
design. And I do
Sophistication
have to talk
is
briefly
important.
about top-down and bottom-up design. So top-down design is when somebody takes a blueprint, like of your engine, and designs it all from top to bottom. It's very efficient, very self-contained. Bottom-up design is usually when you have disparate systems that all start working together. I deal with them a lot in networking with different computer systems that you have to hook up to talk to one another. There's a lot of inefficiencies. There's a lot of wasted things. And humans and other biological systems, they contain all the hallmarks of bottom-up design, of basically things being patched together. A lot of inefficiencies, like the recurrent laryngeal nerve, like the esophagus being this.
Okay, so the nerve is wrong. It's designed wrong.
What do you mean designed wrong?
Okay, well, you brought up that left phalangeal nerve, right? You said that's wrong.
Recurrent laryngeal nerve. Are you familiar with it at all?
Yeah. So if that's wrong, there's a guy who he funds creation stuff, and we could take yours and re-engineer it so that it doesn't make that big loop, and then we could do an experiment to see if it is actually used for something, because it could be used just to sense where your body is. There's a tendon in your leg. They thought it was vestigial and it was useless, but it was a sensor, so you know where your leg is. So maybe that nerve is part of it, but we won't know until we get somebody who thinks it's useless. And if that's you, then we could do an experiment. We'll just connect it instead of having it go around, and then we'll see if it has a purpose or not.
Well, there's a principle in evolution called the good enough principle. It essentially means that as long as something is good enough to function, it doesn't really need to be correct, or I can't remember the term you used that isn't really accurate to something describing something like this.
You were saying it was a design flaw. We're offering to make it better. If you think your nerve is flawed, I know a guy who will fund it and who will make it so it's not flawed in your mind. And then we'll see if it has a function.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm not, this is the thing. Like, I don't know who would go under major surgery just to have their nerve read when it works anyway. That's the whole point about evolution. If it works, it's good enough, but it isn't the most efficient thing you could do. There's a lot of inefficiencies in the human body. A lot of things.
Like what?
Well, the fact that we choke on our food all the time because we have one orifice for breathing and eating. Bit of a problem.
Try to get two of them. Try to get two orifices and try to turn your neck. It's an optimum design, so your neck can be smaller and not choke. Those cross.
Yeah, there's also our wisdom teeth, which kill us part of the time. That seem to be a problem. I might have mine removed. I'm not sure about you, but it seems to be very inefficient for, sort of how we live these days.
Well, keep in mind, we're a copy of a copy of a copy going all the way back to Adam. It's amazing we can work at all. There's an amazing, how we're still alive. I think there was a Russian guy who looked at our mutation rate and he says, why aren't we dead 100 times over? And that's because we haven't been here millions of years.
That study was a problem because they were mixing up the mutation rate with the how often they fix the substitution rate. That's what they were mixing up. So there has been
other studies. There's other studies that show that our mutation rate is a lot. Our mutation rate is a lot higher than what they would expect. But
not a problem.
So when do I get to steer the ship, Donnie?
Well, go for it. Please. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, because it's more free flowing, I do want to give you guys the opportunity.
Sure, yeah, my apologies.
Basically, it's been great. I want to, I guess the nature of it, I want you guys to guide it however you feel best. So what we'll do, since we just hit the 22-minute mark, Brian, why don't we allow you to lead the way and pick a couple topics? Go ahead.
Yeah, you had mentioned Mary Schweitzer. What do you think she found? Did she find blood vessels, or did she just find remnants of blood vessels?
She found the structures of blood vessels preserved, and she even found some soft tissue, some collagen. But it was basically she had to bathe it in acid in order for it to be somewhat usable in her studies. But that having been said, she certainly busted open the idea of how long soft tissue can last for in dinosaurs.
Okay. Well, okay. Now let's separate the facts from the judgment. The fact is we find dinosaur tissue. And up until then, they didn't think that it could last that long because all their other things showed that it couldn't. My point is, your conclusion is it lasts millions of years. My conclusion is they aren't millions of years old. And so basically we have the same facts. We just have different conclusions. And I'm not surprised when they find stuff, but Mary is, and the whole scientific world was, so that they tried to say it was biofilm. But
aren't humans older than dinosaurs?
Well, we were both made on day 6. So we're the same age.
So why don't we find human tissue in the same state?
Well, maybe there's a bias against it, and maybe they're misidentified because maybe they are just so brainwashed that they won't even consider something to be a human if they find it. It's like humans can't be in this layer, so they'll misidentify it. And maybe
I'm fascinated now. You're saying there's a conspiracy to cover up ancient, incredibly old human fossils, so they're lying about it. Is that what you're saying?
Why was Mark Armitage fired?
I don't know who that is.
He was at Cal State Northfield, I believe, and he found
I have no idea.
He found a dinosaur bone, and he got it published in Acta Histochemica, or he submitted it, and he ran the lab at the Cal State, and he ran this huge spectrograph, and he got the Employee of the Year. And then he put this paper in that says, hey, guys, I found this bone cell in a T-Rex or Triceratops horn. And he got a call from the publisher, and he said, you realize this is controversial? And he goes, yeah. And they published it. And what do you think happened to him? You think he got a raise?
I don't know who you're talking about.
He got fired. He went from Employee of the Year, and then he found something that derailed the geologic column, because bone cells can't last that long. Nerves can't last that long. And yet he's finding them over and over again. And now his pictures, they fired him, and then he sued him to get his, he sued him for wrongful termination, and he won, but he's not teaching there anymore. So who really won? And it's now his pictures.
Does he believe in a 6,000-year-old Earth?
Yeah.
He does.
But he didn't.
Name?
His
Let's check this. What was
Mark Armitage.
Mark Armitage.
Yeah, ARM. ITC. How do you do it? ARM ITAGE, I think. I can check it out. If you go into rsr.org, you can hear him being interviewed. And then if you are interested in learning about some of these people who have been fired, just listen to Jerry Bergman. He's got 3 volumes of people who submitted. That one is Slaughter the Dissidents. One is Silencing the Darwin Skeptics. And one of them is Censoring the Darwin Skeptics. And so, there are people that if you kick the sacred cow of evolution, you're going to lose your job, you're going to lose your grant funding, you're going to lose your tenure. Just check out Dr. Gonzalez at Iowa State. He doesn't believe in a young Earth. I'm just reading his paper now. Who does? Mark Armitage?
Yeah.
Sure he does.
Okay.
I helped him at one of his labs. He's going around and showing people dinosaur nerves. I've actually seen dinosaur nerves with my own eyes, and those can't last millions of years. Collagen can only last 700,000 years, and they're finding that with dinosaurs. They find bone cells, blood vessels, and all of that, in my conclusion, those are the facts. And then you conclude that they're preserved over millions of years, yet you don't know how. And then I conclude that they're not that old. And so what we're doing tonight, we're just giving people all the information so they can make informed decisions, and then they can check it out. And if you want, I can show you Mary Schweitzer, a clip of her, and you can see the stretchy stuff. Because when I was talking to Planet Peterson, he was just saying that they were rock impressions. But no, they're stretchy.
So I want to talk about this because he wasn't actually a paleontologist. He was a temporary hire and worked as an electron microscopy technician. Now that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. If he finds something, that's totally cool. But the whole point is that Mary Schweitzer and Others are sort of saying, hey, these could be preserved for an incredible long time using iron, and they're basically bringing out papers to show how the iron preserves them. And you
Well,
choose to
actually,
ignore all of
no,
these
no, 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 no,
papers
no.
that sort of show
Actually,
how it happens, and then go for papers that don't, he just vanished.
Yeah, no, he'll be back. I think he went to share his screen and probably clicked the
Hit the
leave
wrong
studio.
button. Yeah, probably, yeah.
Yeah, no worries. So Brian, we'll give you a minute here to make your way back in. And in the meantime, I will remind the audience that we will be doing a Q&A. I'll pause the timer actually right now. We're just at the 28-minute mark. The conversation is flowing nicely. I appreciate the fast-paced, stimulating nature of it. But once we're done with the conversation, we've got closing statements and then an audience Q&A. So at this point, I am all caught up on your questions. I've bumped super chats to the top for those to be a guaranteed reading for our debaters. We've got Brian back. I'm assuming you went to share your screen, Brian, and accidentally clicked the.
Yeah, it was a pilot error here, and what they're finding is that well, first of all, Mary Schweitzer's her paper, she gave him an anticoagulant, and she also did a molecular filter on it, and she also spun it down. That's how she got it to preserve for whatever period of time. And what they're actually, that doesn't happen in nature. And what they actually are finding is that iron makes it degrade faster. And so their ideas are not working. And so I'm just saying that look at the evidence, and then, but are you even open to a creator? Could there be an intelligent design? Are you just, you got that's just walled off. You won't even consider it.
Sure. I mean, this is the thing. It's kind of like, well, yeah, I don't mind there being evidence for a creator, but all you seem to be doing is sort of saying, hey, this is a problem with evolution, which isn't a problem. And then this person came up with this person, evolution. What you're not doing, Brian, is showing any evidence for the creator. All you're doing is just attacking another hypothesis. That's all.
How does a baby go from living in fluid to living in air after birth? What has to happen to that baby the very first time?
How does a fish go from living in water to living in air? Mud skipper does it all the time.
Well, I'm not talking about mud. Maybe it was designed to do that. I'm talking about a baby.
Yeah, but that's the problem, Brian. I'm not saying, like, all you're doing is saying, hey, you can't explain this, or I've got this question which you can't answer, or you've got this problem here. What I'm asking you for is evidence for your hypothesis, not against any other one.
I just gave it to you and you just ignored it. You just brushed it aside and asked me another question.
No. Because here's the thing, it's a false dichotomy, because even if, look, just say evolution was completely wrong, and just say we had no idea and all of this stuff, it wouldn't mean a creator God, okay? Even if that was the case, I could say, hey, aliens did it, and you're done.
Well, that's what I'm saying. These are belief systems about the past. You know, we got the same facts. I wish they would teach the facts in school, not belief systems about the past. That's what we.
The problem is that you're starting with the conclusion. You're going, it was God as the conclusion, and that's your starting point. Whereas in science, what we do is we look around, make observations without a conclusion, and see where it leads us. Now, that might lead us to a God, but what you're not doing is providing any evidence to link that starting point of what we see around us to a God. You've already made that conclusion, and you're trying to find things around you to make God the correct conclusion, which you've made already.
But you've already concluded that there is no God, or science as a whole. Science as a whole has concluded that there's no intelligent designer. Science as a whole.
No, it hasn't.
Oh yeah. You ask these guys. You ask these guys and check these out. You know, get all the information, Mark, and then decide if there's a witch hunt or not.
Because all they've done is say that evolution was how humans came about. A lot of Christians believe that God created evolution as the mechanism for implementing his will. It hasn't excluded a creator. It's just excluded the entire idea of, we were made from ash and God breathed life onto, that isn't true, because we've got the evidence to back it up.
Well, then they believe they
eliminate
believe
a creator.
Jesus is a liar then, because in Mark
They
8,
believe Jesus is a liar.
well, if they say that God made evolution to do all this stuff, then Jesus lied. Because
I have no idea.
in Mark 10:6, he said, but from the beginning of the creation, so Jesus is a creationist. So
Okay.
from the beginning of the creation, God made them male and female. Not millions of years later, not billions of years after creation. He made them right at the beginning, right there on day 6. So if they're saying God used evolution to make everything, they're not following God's or Jesus's words, that's for sure. And they're
Oh,
on really
maybe he was mistaken. Maybe it was a metaphor for something.
Jesus was mistaken. Oh,
Well,
boy,
Jesus said a
Mark,
lot of things that
Mark,
weren't actual events, didn't he?
Mark.
He used parables to talk.
Mark, he refers to Genesis as historical event time and time again. Okay, and
Okay.
if it wasn't a historical event, then all the New Testament writers, their credibility is shot. When if
Who
God,
were the New Testament writers?
what's that?
Who were the New Testament writers?
Well, you got Paul, you got Matthew, you got Peter, you got let's
We
see.
don't know for sure that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Well, yeah, that's how Satan wants you. He wants you to question everything. But let's go back to.
Oh,
so
I'm sorry. This is fascinating. How did Satan come into it all of a sudden? How did that?
Let's just let. I think we're.
Oh,
running
I'm
down
fascinated. This is really interesting because when I sort of
steer the ship, when do I get to steer the ship?
Oh, look, I mean, I thought we were talking about what you wanted to talk about.
What I would like to do is just play Mary Schweitzer so everybody gets to see, because Planet Peterson doesn't think this is real. So we'll just play this if it's okay, Donnie. I don't know. Do I have to share my screen again? Is that all right?
Actually, Brian, because we've got 7 minutes left, can you iterate what she would say in that video and then allow Mark to respond?
Well, how about I'll turn the sound off. We'll just play it and we can talk over it. How about that?
How long is the video?
Like 2 minutes. It's like 2 minutes.
I'd prefer the last 6 or 7 minutes to avoid playing videos, but if you could reiterate.
Well, it stretches. But Planet Peterson thinks it's just remnants in a rock, but you see it stretch. And she couldn't believe her eyes 17 times. Nobody would think it would be there because of all the molecular breakdown experiments shows that it can't be there, but it is. And so basically, yeah, it's stretchy. She couldn't believe her eyes.
That it shows a young Earth.
Well, no, she's an old earther.
So hang on a second. Hang on. She's the one making conclusions about.
Mark Armitage,
she's the one making conclusions about her study. So why aren't you listening to what her conclusions are? That iron can preserve these for a lot longer than we expect.
Maybe she wants to save her job. Maybe she saw what happened to Mark Armitage and she doesn't want to have it happen to her. Maybe. And so I think that we should just look at all the evidence and put it all on the table and not have all these rescuing devices to prop up a theory. And just let people think. I mean, would you be...
What rescuing devices am I using?
Well, the soft tissue preservation, for one.
But that's what the author of the paper you're talking about says. I'm directly referencing what they say.
Yeah,
and so to have a conspiracy to say, hey, well, she's being bullied and forced to say this, I think that's really disingenuous because she actually put a disclaimer on one of her papers telling young Earth creationists to stop saying it shows that the Earth is young because it doesn't.
Well, look at Mark Armitage analysis of her paper, and the methods and procedures that are not listed, which are normally listed, and they're not. Then he finally got it, and again, she gave the blood an anticoagulant. She spun it down in a molecular filter, and then she let's see, what else did she do?
Iced it in acid.
Yeah. And so she did a lot of unnatural things to that blood to make it last. And I'm just saying...
it's also she had to do a lot of things to make it in any way usable for testing because it was in such a premineralized condition. It wasn't
that's
exactly...
how she got it out. Yeah, that's how... You dissolve the rock to get the tissue, and then she did the iron that way. But I guess my main thing was methodological naturalism. Is that all there is? Is that all there is? Is that all there is?
The rock was there because it was pre-mineralized. It was actually fossilizing. It was in the process of fossilizing, which takes an incredible amount of time. probably
No,
more
it
than you're
doesn't.
giving for thou.
It doesn't. It takes an incredible.
Yeah,
It takes the
doesn't.
right conditions. It doesn't make a lot of take a time. It just needs the right
Correct.
conditions.
Yes.
Right,
And
that
we
doesn't,
now
it doesn't
know
need
under
time.
the right conditions, it can be preserved using iron for a really long time. And that's, you know, everybody sort of
No,
hailing
no,
Mary Schweitzer as finding that
no,
out. But
no.
you're the only
There's
one to
another
sort of
study.
say,
There's another study by the Creation Research Society that shows that iron actually breaks it down faster, and you can check
yeah,
that
I
one out.
think
But the main thing,
I would.
the main thing is this methodological naturalism. Is that all that exists, Mark? Is it just matter and energy? Is
What
that
do you
all?
mean all that exists? I'm
Yeah,
not
is
sure
that
what you mean by that.
is that it? Is it just matter and
So,
energy?
like when you're talking about methodological naturalism, it's a branch of philosophy. It's
Well, no,
basically
I want to talk the biggest
a
thing. What's in what basically do you have a spirit? Do you have a soul?
not to my knowledge.
So are you just
How would I
molecules?
how would I find that exactly? How do you confirm that?
Well, I would suggest that you would search diligently. If you seek, you shall find, and you shall find the truth, and the truth will set you free. And Jesus said, "I'm the way,
Okay.
the truth, and the life." But if you don't have a spirit or a soul, are you just matter and energy?
I think so.
Okay. Well, just molecules in action. Is
Pretty
that what
much,
you are?
yeah.
Okay. Well, at one time, I don't know if you're married or not, but at one time in your life, your molecules had another reaction with another person. Okay. And you married her, right?
Okay.
So you might have those same reactions with other people today, other molecules. Do you pursue those intimate relations?
Well, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, just yes or no.
I don't know what you're talking about to answer yes or no. You're saying that I got married before. Am I going to pursue other intimate
If
relations?
you just
Is that
matter
what
and
you're
energy.
Are you basically asking me in a really roundabout way, am I going to cheat on my wife? Is that what you're
Well,
asking me?
if it's just matter, well, I'm just saying that I'm just a reason why. Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't I? Because I
Yeah.
have a bond and a life with my wife that's
But
very important
you're
to
just
me.
molecules and matter. Molecules and matter don't make bonds. You're just molecules and matter.
What? Of course we do. What are you talking about?
No, you're just matter.
I have to remind you, Brian, you just said molecules don't make bonds.
Right. If you're just molecule, I'm trying to say that you're more than just matter and energy. You have a soul.
Yeah, I
you have a
don't.
spirit. You have
Yeah,
that.
no, I don't.
So
I don't
that
see
goes
why
along with
that's
my worldview.
necessary.
That goes along with
Yeah,
my
no.
worldview.
So,
Your
Brian,
worldview-
I don't see that as necessary to forming bonds with people. We are a social species. We actually
But why?
need social interaction connection to
Yeah.
fulfill our lives.
Well,
Because
no, we're
well,
from
it's
your
kind of like, well, hold on, Brian, let me finish because I've sort of let you disparage my marriage enough, you know. So it's because we have these bonds that cause us to really care about others. Empathy, reciprocity, it's how we've evolved to work together. It's why we're intelligent social creatures and not, you know, brutish solo hunters or something. We have to cooperate. And part of that is basically having a social structure. We see it in other animals, like capuchin monkeys are a really fascinating example of, you know, social structure among apes. It's not like humans are the only ones that do this. You might as well ask why a silverback gorilla doesn't go off and do certain things. It's like, because that's the societal structure that it has. I'm not sure why a soul is required for that. I'm not sure why a spirit is required for that. Presumably, capuchin monkeys don't have souls or spirits. So I don't know what you're talking about.
But if you're just matter and energy, can you control your matter?
Can I control my matter? Some of it.
You can. Okay, where did that come from?
I said some of it.
Where does that consciousness come from?
Where does my consciousness come from?
Yeah, where did it
seems
come
to
from?
come from my brain.
Well, yeah, but where did that come from?
Where did my brain come from?
How do you get consciousness from non-living, from matter?
How do you get
that?
consciousness from non-living?
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay, so very, very gradually over billions of years, you have selection mechanisms that create life. You have, you know, and we're not sure how that happened. You have it being an advantage to be able to sense things around you and react. So you have reactionary nerve bundling first. And then eventually, after billions of years, you get all the way up to, hey, having cognitive processes that can do pattern recognition, for instance, might be advantageous for, I don't know, hunter-gatherers, would be really advantageous if you can use pattern recognition like following tracks, or induction, like, hey, if I eat these berries, I'm going to be sick. Things like that are very, very advantageous. So what we've noticed is that only things with brains have intelligence, and the more complex the physical structure of the brain, the more complex the intelligence will be. And humans just have put all their stat points in intelligence.
So is that high confidence evidence or low confidence evidence?
Is that high confidence or low confidence?
Yes. Is this testable and observable, or is this not testable and not observable? What you just explained.
The more complex brains have higher intelligence. It's very observable.
Right. But before that, how nerves get to have consciousness, is that high confidence evidence, or is that low confidence evidence?
What basically the way that things have developed over the time.
Yeah. Is that high confidence?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty high confidence. We can see that, there are animals that have no brains whatsoever and only react, like jellyfish, for instance. They don't have any actual brain structure. They just react to things. Then we get things like insects, which seem very reactionary, but they have more complex systems. And then going up to, well, obviously mammals have a lot more complex. Like, I'm not sure what you expect me to say about this.
I would expect you to say that's low confidence.
Okay, so what's your explanation for intelligence?
I would say God did it. Supreme intelligence.
And what's your confidence for that? High confidence or low confidence?
Well, again, they're both belief systems. And in school, I don't think you should teach.
I answered you, Brian. Is that a high confidence or a low confidence?
Yeah, I guess that would be. Yeah, that would be. It's not testable. It's not observable. Yeah, so that's low. So they're both low. And so my position is we shouldn't teach stuff that's not testable in science. Just teach people there's a Grand Canyon, there's a river, there's a tree, there's a cell, there's a DNA, and leave the imagination out of it. The belief systems about the past. Just leave it out of it.
We don't really show how intelligence came about or consciousness came about in the first place, but we've got a pretty good understanding of how genetics and phylogeny, the nested hierarchy of the phylogenical tree, actually works due to things like endogenous retroviruses and things like that. We've tracked these genetic markers way down the tree, and ERVs just happen to fit into that.
Well, there's some science journals I'd like you to check out. Yeah, this would be, let's see. Yeah, this would be National Geographic Echolocation in Bats and Whales. And it talks about amazing that two different species have evolved the same trick, and similarity isn't just skin. And it says if you drew a family tree based on their amino acid sequence, bats and toothed whales would end up in the same tight-knit group. And then you've also got, this is National Geographic, how a quarter of the cow genome came from snakes.
Yeah, that's BOVB. Hang on. That's BOVB. You are being this is very dishonest. It's not like a quarter of it. They're talking about with this, because I've read this.
Wait, let me quote it. The best explanation for these bizarre patterns is that the bovine jump species, and it's done 9 times, and it remains a series. And then there's they have a hard time. Yep. And then there's the
Do you understand what horizontal
PNSA?
gene? Do you understand what horizontal gene transfer is?
Well, yeah, it's something that you imagine. And then
what do you mean we imagine? We observe it. What are you talking about? Like transposons?
I'm saying that the tree that you said is so
Brian.
So
Brian, we see retrotransposons actually at work when viruses transpose part of their structure to another animal or another organism. Like we observe this. It's not something we imagine. It also could be viruses transferred by ticks or bugs or something like that. It's just that you're sort of saying, hey, we absolutely have observed retrotransposons in action. Not 100%. Like, I can't believe you said that.
I'm saying that there's a lot. Yeah, maybe I misspoke there. Yeah, my apologies for that. But I'm just saying that your tree isn't as solid as you think it is. There's a lot of people that say it's bizarre.
Oh,
this one,
it's messy.
That one. Yeah,
it's very messy. Yeah, it's very messy, which is
Yeah.
what you'd expect from a fluid dynamic system rather than created kinds. If it was created kinds, there wouldn't be this messiness between all of them and these crossovers and back and forth and unable to distinguish species from species. That it would be all clear cut, but it's not. It's messy because it is all one tree of life where distinguishing species gets really hard. It gets, whether what something's what a species and then this other one isn't. Because they are just sort of organisms reproducing in variation, that is what we would expect. If it would be that, hey, it's hard to distinguish these animals from one another, especially with horizontal gene transfer happening in between all of it. That's exactly what we would expect.
So what's the common ancestor between a bat and a whale? They both have the same genes. What's the common ancestor?
I don't know.
I would say my submission was, instead of a common ancestor, it had a common designer. And it had these genes for echolocation, and he used them in a bat and he used them in a whale.
What evidence do you have for that?
What's that?
What evidence do you have for that?
They both work. I mean,
but you do realize there's sort of convergent evolution where two different organisms will have the same sort of type of ability, but they have evolved in different ways.
Well,
because evolution.
Calling it something doesn't solve it. How did that happen? Identical.
Because it's not like, usually convergent evolution isn't identical. It will have the same outcome, but it pushes them in a direction because it's incredibly useful for that organism. So for instance, the eye, for instance, has developed in both mollusks and humans, but they are different systems that evolved differently.
And what's the chance of an eye evolving?
Very high.
Very high as in unlikely, yes. Or very high as in likely?
Incredibly likely. Because it is such a major benefit. So what you have is sort of eye spots being developed, and those eye spots will be able to tell the amount of light, for instance. It's very advantageous for a creature who, say, lives in a pond to be able to know whether they're out in the open or beneath a rock. So it's incredibly advantageous. Then, sort of more and more, if it curves round a bit, it can tell which direction the light is in, so it can start to perceive where the open field is and where the shelter is. As it curves around, it just develops from there. It's very straightforward.
Donnie, could you share my screen?
Yes.
Okay, this is the Trochlea challenge. You see that sling, that muscle that goes up in the upper right corner, and it goes through that sling, and then it goes back down to move the eye. How did that evolve?
I don't know.
It looks designed.
But isn't that P.C. Myers? Isn't he like an evolutionary biologist?
Yeah, he sure is. And this is what Bob Enyart, this was his challenge to him. And he said, I don't know. I don't know how that evolved. And so if you don't know how it evolved and it looks like design, it would appear that there was a designer at hand.
That would be God of the gaps, as I discussed earlier. I mean, just because I don't know something does not give any more evidence for your hypothesis. You need to show that is actually the case.
I think it does. If it either was designed or it wasn't, evidence against
that is literally a logical fallacy. That is the argument from ignorance. Is basically saying, because I'm ignorant of how it happened, then your suggestion has weight, and that is not the case. You need to show that this is actually designed, not just assume that it's designed and then say, well, because you can't explain something, it is. That is not how we reason things.
So if you saw Mount Rushmore, would you assume that was designed?
No, because I know somebody carved that into rock. However, there's a lot of rocks out there that are basically have these holes in it. They look designed, but they're not. It's actually done naturally by the wind passing through.
Mount Everest. So would it be absurd to think that Mount Everest got there by natural processes?
Can you give me an example of something that's not designed?
Well, don't answer a question with a question. Would it be absurd to think that the Mount Rushmore got there by natural processes?
Yes, but that's because I know it was carved by people, and I'd like to ask a question now. Brian, I'd like to ask a question. This isn't your question time. What is not designed in your worldview? What are you comparing this to? What's not designed?
I would say like a rock that's on the shore.
So God didn't design rocks.
Well, not it's. I mean, they got ground up and they turned into sedimentary rock, but that's not a
Okay.
design.
So that's not part of his design. That's just something that occurs naturally.
Yeah, I would submit to you that a simple, probably not the only, but to show
Okay.
evidence of design would be multiple parts working together with precision timing for a purpose, like the engine in your car. It would be absurd to think that got together by chance. Well, there's a gazillion other multiple parts working together with precision timing in your body to keep you alive. And I think that it would be absurd to think that that wasn't designed. If an engine couldn't get together by chance, why would you think your body could get put together by
Well,
chance?
that is just an assumption on your part that it is there by design, and so you're just incredulous that that could arise about by natural processes. I mean, you may say the same about planets. Oh, it can't arise by natural processes because they are in some kind of synchronous fashion. The problem is that we see spontaneous synchronicity. Synchronous things arise all the time, and there are some experiments we can do to show that, but this is sort of just, well, I can't believe it's not butter. That is essentially your argument here.
Well, no, it's incredible the amount of mental gymnastics where you won't see a design. They're proving the point of how Crick said that you have to constantly tell yourself that it's not designed. Why would you have to constantly tell yourself?
Yeah, I don't care what Crick says. I don't care what Crick says.
Well, he's a Nobel Prize winner.
Yeah, I still don't care. I really don't care.
Well, if I was in your position, I wouldn't care either. But this is for the people that are out there. It's like, oh, a Nobel Prize person says everything's designed, and you have to think that it's not designed.
Well, not everything's designed, apparently.
Well, in biology, I mean, do you really think
just everything in biology is designed?
Well, life is, for sure.
Life is designed. How do you know that?
Well, because it's got a fingerprint of a designer on it. Do you really think that?
So where's this fingerprint?
Do you really think that kinesin gets to the right spot by chance every time, a trillion times in your body?
It's not chance. It's
okay, how does it do it? How does that microtubule?
It's deterministic.
What determines it?
So
I mean, that microtubule could go anywhere.
Those animals where it did not work, and we have a lot of systems fail all the time, they didn't actually reproduce to produce creatures where it doesn't work. It only reproduces if it works, and there is a lot of this going on, and that's what we've sort of done experiments on. Is this something that will happen? And yes, these creatures that are born have mutations where things don't work. They will not continue. They will be weeded out. That is the entire point of natural selection. And instead of actually showing that it's designed, you've said, oh, well, look, it looks designed, it's complex, it has all these things, it must be designed. Does not actually show it. It is just a claim by you, which currently is unsubstantiated and based upon a faith position, starting from a book that you think cannot be untrue.
Well, natural selection only works when there's reproduction. How did you get all this stuff for life to begin? I mean, there's 10 million.
As I said, I've said this probably about 3 times already. I've said this 3 times already. All you need is a selection and replication mechanism. That's it.
And
like the replication part.
Who is the selection? Who selects?
Who selects? The environment.
Now, I would disagree. This is where there is a theory in the creation model called continuous environmental tracking, which says that the organism, the organ, the tissue, all the way down to the molecular pathways, there's something sensing the environment and making the appropriate changes at all those different levels to keep it alive, where it's not the environment that's changing the animal, it's something's designed into the animal to adapt to the environment. And it's continuous environmental tracking at ICR, and they're doing really good work with the blind cavefish, which doesn't have any pigment or eyes, and that's supposed to be broken genes that have been passed on from another mutant way back when. And so then they put it in the sunlight, and if it was broken genes, it would still stay without pigment, but guess what? It got pigment. So it's just something that got turned on and off for the environment, and so that's pointing to continuous environmental tracking, which points to engineering principles, which points to creator. And so the blind cancers were wrong. Yeah, so where did the epigenetics come from?
Where did the epigenetics come from?
Yeah.
Is that seriously what you're asking?
Yes.
So epigenetics is the ability to switch genes on and off to adapt to your environment within the same generation. So you don't think that would be advantageous for an organism?
Oh, I think it'd be incredibly advantageous, but I'm asking you,
There
how
you
did that
go.
come about? How did that come about? By blind chance? And then
It's not
the
blind
DNA.
chance. That's the problem. You don't understand. The mutations are chance. So it might have, like, one of the organisms might have mutated that, but it's not blind chance that it survived, because basically something that had a mutation that would allow them to do that would have an advantage over the rest of them, and it would survive. And that is reinforced and fixed into the genome of whatever it is that it is.
Right. But the mutations were blind chance. Is that agreed?
Well, yeah, the mutations are chance, but that doesn't mean the selection method. That doesn't mean the selection mechanisms are blind chance. But you're trying to characterize the entire thing as blind chance, and that is not how it works.
Okay. So, I mean, we can see the evidence, and then we can see, you know, which one makes the
you haven't given any evidence. You've just made claims that it's designed. I need evidence for that.
Do you know what Eichmann's paradox is? Back in 1979 or 71, one of the two. Eichmann's paradox. He won a Nobel Prize. And he said, how can you have DNA without a DNA repair system? Because you can't get long strands of DNA without a repair system. And yet the repair system is a long strand of DNA. And that's been a paradox that's been on the table for 50 years. So maybe you can figure it out. You know, what came first, the DNA repair system or the DNA?
Probably the DNA, but I mean, before that, it was RNA, and it was, I mean, if I'm correct, and my assumption is correct, let's just say it was amyloids, right? So you've got a selection and a replication mechanism. It goes into RNA, and then things start to form from there. You're sort of going, okay, well, I'm going to compare modern DNA, right? Again, the very thing that we've ended up with, and assume it was like that billions of years ago. No, what are you doing?
Well, you got $10 million. You can cash in, Mark. You can get $10 million. EVO2.org. You can get $10 million. Show them how to get a self-replicating cell. You can do it if it's that simple.
If I don't know, does that mean a God hypothesis is any more likely?
Yeah.
No, that's God of the gaps. Just because I don't know something doesn't make your solution any more probable or even plausible.
Okay,
I could say, hey, a magic stone did it, or aliens did it, or a flying unicorn did it. It's not any more likely that it's a God. You haven't actually given any evidence.
You have a book that shows how the flying unicorn did it, that's archaeologically, scientifically, prophetically, and historically accurate?
It's not historically accurate. It's not prophetically accurate either. There's a lot of problems with that. Least among it, that what I showed was like that they were basically saying you could get striped sheep from striping down branches and then like getting sheep to breed in front of them. I mean, you can't honestly think that's scientifically accurate, right?
Oh yeah, you're fulfilling prophecy right now. You know, it says in the last days scoffers will come. Scoffing at the Bible, and they'll deny the flood, and they'll put all their faith in uniformitarianism. You know, that was all prophesied, and you're doing that. But the Bible.
Let me give you a story, Brian. It's from the Quran, and that is that Muhammad's uncle didn't believe him that he was the prophet, and so Muhammad made the amazing prophecy that his uncle would remain an unbeliever for all the days of his life. Is that an accurate prophecy, or was that just he knew he was full of it?
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, so if someone knows they're full of it, I could say, hey, I'm going to say that it was the magic unicorn. And Brian will never believe me. He is a scoffer. He is a doubter. He'll never believe me. Does that mean I'm working prophecy?
Well, put it down in the book, and we'll see. We'll look back at it in 2,000 years, see if your book's still around in 2,000 years. I mean, that's a miracle in itself. But the Bible was right about circumcising on the 8th day, because that's when the protothombralum is, it peaks at 110% on the 8th day, and then it says the life of the flesh is in the blood. That's true too. It talked about the paths of the sea in Psalm 8:8. That was true. It talked about the springs
Hold
of
it,
the
hold it,
sea
hold it, hold it.
in
You're going
Job
through so
38,
many things.
16.
Like it's not a prophecy or some kind of
Well,
divine
no, I'm
revelation to
talking about
realize
time.
that when the blood exits from somebody, they don't live. That is not something that is a great stretch. And I do want to ask though, like, do you think if a book remains around for 2,000 years, it must be true?
No, I'm saying that when
Okay, so what does it matter?
okay, well, you said that there's nothing scientific in here, and I'm listing it off. You
Yeah.
know, they didn't know there was springs in the sea until 1977, but yet they talked about it in Job. And then it said that he hangs the earth on nothing. That's the perfect picture of gravity. And then the host of heaven can't be numbered. You know, we can't count the stars. And then one star
But
differs from another in
gravity
glory.
isn't nothing, and neither is the Earth hanging in nothing. It's basically a curve in space time. It's not
Right. But
nothing.
back then they were talking about it was on turtles, on top of turtles. You know, they didn't know. And it also says
Well, I
that
mean,
one
do
star
you
differs from
also
another in glory.
do you also think that the Bible is true when it says there is a firmament above and that there's four corners of the earth?
Well, the firmament above maybe came down when the windows of heaven were open, and the four corners of earth, that's just a figure of
I'm
speech.
sorry, windows of heaven. What
Yeah.
is that?
Yeah, my perspective, and it's a minority perspective, but I do think that there was a covering above the earth at one time, and that in Genesis 7:11, when the fountains of the great deep broke up, the windows of heaven were open. But the Bible does say that all flesh is not the same. There's one for men, one for beasts, one for fish, and one for birds. And now we know that you can hit something with your car, and they'll be able to tell if that was a person or not. And so the Bible's, when it talks about accurate, and then it talks about the wind returning again to its circuits. They used to think it just went in a.
Well, it doesn't answer my question if you think there's literally four corners of the earth.
Well, no, that's a figure of speech.
Okay, so why aren't the others figures of speech?
Because they're accurate. I mean, they work.
Okay,
I mean,
so it's
it
a
looks
figure
like
of
it looks
speech.
like
Hang on
you're
a second. It's a figure of speech if it's not accurate, but if it is accurate, or you can interpret it as accurate, then it is an actual literal thing that they're saying, and so they're correct and scientifically accurate.
Well, it's kind of interesting that you ignore all the scientific stuff that I'm pointing out to you to point at something that's a figure of speech. You're ignoring all the stuff. You say there's nothing scientific in the Bible, and you keep cutting me off when I keep showing you that there is science in the Bible. And I think that it's interesting that you don't care what I have to say that there is science, but you're trying to divert it with other questions.
Well, they didn't really have science back then, but they can certainly make observations.
Well,
Like, for instance,
God told
in
him.
an estuary, there is a distinction between the river water and the ocean water, for instance. You can see that, that the life is in the blood. You know, people would realize that, hey,
Well, they didn't. Well, they didn't realize
someone
that was
used to
George
ship-
Washington. George Washington, they bled him to death. You know, if they would have realized that, we better keep it in there, because they had a thing back there when they said that you're sick because you got bad blood. We got to bleed you, and if you bleed you on one side, you got to bleed him on the other side so you don't get out of balance. And that's how he died. So they weren't.
Yeah, but they could still say that. Yeah, they were trying to get rid of the bad blood, which was a terrible idea. Don't get me wrong, it's a terrible idea. But you could still say that life was in the blood, so they were trying to take bad blood out of him. It doesn't negate anything that I've said. That they still realized the importance of blood to life.
Have the consensus in science ever been wrong? Have they taught stuff? They were dogmatic about it, and they were wrong in the past. Okay, could they be dogmatic today and be wrong?
Sure.
Okay, and that's my point.
Could you be dogmatic about something as well? Okay,
yeah, and what I want people to do is to see both sides, so then they can get all the information, and then they can think for themselves. And that's not happening in our schools. That's not happening in our museums. That's not happening in our media. We're getting a government narrative rammed down our throat, and I'm tired of it. And I hope other people are tired of it, and they want to.
No, it's just because science has. No, it's because science.
If they want to think, they got to see both sides.
Brian, science adheres to methodological naturalism. You're welcome to teach that in theology, in your Christian classes, in whatever, but it isn't science.
Well, science is testable, and a lot of that stuff that we've talked about tonight isn't testable, and a lot of the stuff that's in the textbook is not testable. And I
it
pointed it
100%
out to
is.
my school board, and I said,
Government-
hey, these things are wrong according to Nature, NASA, National Geographic, and PubMed. And they said, well,
Well,
we're just
I'm so sorry for your school board then.
Yeah,
I
yeah, I
don't
am
know
too.
what they must have gone through.
Yeah. Well, I showed them, do you think errors should be in the
Well,
textbooks?
I tell you what, I think you should go and sort of do a class on what science actually is, the
Right.
methodology
But-
behind it, because your methodology seems to be really lacking when it comes to creationism. It seems to be, hey, it looks like it's designed, so therefore it's designed, or I believe this, so it must be, and that's not how science works.
Well, I didn't bring that up at the school board. I showed them Nature, I showed them NASA, I showed them National Geographic, I showed them PubMed, I showed them secular journals, and what was in the textbook was contrary to what was in the secular journals. And they just said, the curriculum person said, well, we're just teaching the state standards. And then I said, well, what standard says we're 1.6% different from chimps? And she didn't respond, but the superintendent emailed me and said, well, he contacted a law firm. Instead of contacting the publisher, they contacted a law firm. And so I went to the school board and I asked the school board, would you do something about it? And as far as I know, they've done nothing about it. I mean, do you think that they should teach errors in the textbooks?
Do you think they should teach errors in the textbooks?
Yeah.
No, but you know,
Good.
whether you think there's an error or not,
no,
it
it's
isn't
not
really
it's
up
not,
to you.
It's not me. I'm showing them journals. I'm showing them secular journals that show us that it's wrong. I mean, they say that
well, usually the curriculum is a cooperative, sort of endeavor between things like the National Academy of Sciences and other scientific, institutions around a country. It's usually not, because the government aren't scientists either, right? They aren't participating in science, right?
No doubt.
So
I found that
it usually is a
Yeah.
collaborative effort among like institutes that do operate using science. So, as far as that's concerned, they may not understand why it's wrong, or even if it's wrong at all, because they're not the ones like choosing what it is.
Well, they could have at least contacted me and say, "Oh, let me see what you got here." They just
what you should do is produce a scientific paper, get it done in a journal, and then use that to change the opinion of scientists, because they're the ones to decide the curriculum in the science classroom, right? So in theology class, it'll be whoever's the priests and stuff, doing theology. But in science classrooms, it is the scientists. So it's their mind you've got to change, and the only way you can is by publishing in a peer-reviewed journal.
So I can't use papers that are already published to make my point. I have to publish it myself.
Correct. Yeah, that's how you refute a paper, is you publish a paper refuting it.
What if somebody's already done it? Can't I just show them that paper? This paper shows that this textbook.
Well, I don't know how your thing works. I have no idea how it works. You're not expecting me to answer how your
Nature.
But I don't know how your curriculum works over there. Okay, I have no idea. I don't think that the Board of Science or the Board of Education where I am would take input from the public necessarily to say, hey, I've got this paper which just proves this thing, right? They would usually listen to the National Academy of Sciences, or the usually over here CSIRO, the Commonwealth Scientific Institute of Research Organization, and listen to them over it. So, I don't, and they're the ones that spend their lives studying it. So I don't see why they wouldn't listen to them.
Yeah, I don't see why they want. Let's look at Nature or NASA or PubMed myself either. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why they wouldn't look at that.
Well, there is a way to overturn these, but it isn't sort of hassling your school board. It is changing the science. And this is the thing. All of those people from AIG and
you know what's interesting?
They know that producing a paper and putting it into a peer-reviewed journal is the way to challenge science, but they just don't do it for some reason.
You know what's interesting? I talked to a teacher there, and I pointed out the curriculum, and she doesn't like it either. And then she goes, well, says, I can contact the publisher. And I said, yeah, and so could you. We could have two people pointing it out. And she goes, no, I might lose my job. So a teacher is afraid of losing her job for pointing out errors in the textbooks. That's where we're at today.
I don't know if that's true. I don't know the people involved. I know nothing. You've sort of given me an anecdote and saying, hey, why is this happening? And I don't.
Well, also in our school district.
Did you ever consider, Brian, that they may just be saying that because they don't want to have an argument with you on what's actually in the textbooks?
I don't know. But what I tell
Well,
you,
that's it. We
what I
don't
will
know.
tell
That's the
you
whole point.
is we only have 1 in 4 students in our school district that can do math or science at the standard that they should, and only 1 in 3 can read at the standard that they should. And guess what? We got the superintendent of the year. We got failing grades getting worse, and they gave us the superintendent of the year for making a failings grade school worse. So that's where we're at in America. I hope you're better there in Australia, but that's where
I
we're at.
wouldn't dare comment on the American education system, quite frankly.
Yeah. I think we could probably agree on that.
I don't know where Australia rates it. Is probably higher on education than
We were
than
number
the
one
United States.
until we started the Department of Education in 1977, and now we've gone worse in every metric. So keep the education out of your federal. Make it at the local level if you can.
Guys, this has been a ton of fun. We are way into bonus minutes, but that's okay because the conversation was so stimulating and engaging that I think we probably could have listened to you guys for a lot longer. Great feedback in the chat. People saying, for example, here, this debate is very good. The free flowing nature of it definitely makes it a lot of fun, and intelligent debaters. So some good feedback and thoughts here. So gentlemen, that was a solid roughly hour and 15 minutes of back and forth discussion. Therefore, great endurance. We discussed a lot. It was a comprehensive exchange on the topic of creation versus evolution. A great way to spend a Saturday night, and I guess in Mark's case, a Sunday morning. And so, gentlemen, we do have 5-minute closing statements and some really good audience questions. So we've had a lot of excellent audience engagement and interaction. And just glancing over the questions, I see a couple questions pertaining to topics that were brought up in the debate, but I feel like we didn't really get enough time to expand on some of those topics. So the Q&A period will be a great time to expand on things discussed and brought up. Okay, gentlemen, before we get into those audience questions, which means to the audience, you have exactly 10 minutes, 5 minutes each until we are going to engage your questions. Therefore, you've got 10 minutes left to send in any last minute challenges, objections, questions. I've bumped super chats to the top, and we will guarantee that those get read. And we've also had a good mix of views in the chat of both sides represented today. Okay, Mark, you get the first 5-minute closing statement. If you could take close to the 5 minutes, I'm going to run to the restroom real quick before the Q&A. So, okay, Mark, 5 minutes starts now.
Yeah, so what you'll have noticed throughout the debate is that always the challenge is on evolution. No actual evidence is provided for the creationist thing, just a whole bunch of logical fallacies. And they're fallacies for a reason. God of the gaps is saying, well, you don't know something, therefore it's more likely to be God. An argument from incredulity is saying, well, I can't possibly believe this would have arisen by chance, so it must be designed. You could say the same for snowflakes. You know, they look designed, certain things look designed, but they're not. They occur through natural processes that we can describe. When we start to talk about these scientific methods, we really have falsification criteria. For instance, evolution, there's a famous one of the Precambrian rabbit. Like, why, if we find a rabbit in the Precambrian section of the geological layer, then it's instantly falsified. There's a lot of things like this that could falsify evolution. It has never happened, and usually they appeal to hydrological sorting, that it sorts everything exactly as it's supposed to be, which seems very implausible and sort of a bit ridiculous to me. But we don't have a falsification criteria for a God. We can't in any way, anything that I can say of, hey, this is how it occurred naturally, or this could possibly be how, we can't falsify a God, because they can just say, hey, God changed it in some way. I feel a little disappointed. We didn't get to it, but I would have loved to hear the reasons why light has traveled 13.5 billion years to get to us, and you know the universe isn't that old. Or the heat problem is another one where, you know, really an appeal to magic and miracles has to be made, and that I think is the greatest rescue device of all. I cannot imagine a greater one of having an omnipotent being to be able to overcome any problem at all, up to and including existence or the universe or anything as saying, well, a God did it. But what does that actually tell us about the mechanisms provided? What does that tell us about the explanation? Nothing, absolutely nothing. It's why we don't put that into science, methodological naturalism. It's because if we look at light, say, and say, well, God causes it to, or gravity, for instance, God causes things to fall, we never actually find out that it's the curvature of space-time. We never actually investigate. It is just God did it, and that's all. Yeah, there were Christians involved in the advent of science. They wanted to find out how God did it, not that God did it, but how he did it. So they eliminated God from being the explanation. And just because they assisted with something doesn't mean it belongs to them. It doesn't mean their ideas are any more likely. There was also a bunch of deists as well, people that believed in a God. There were atheists involved in the Enlightenment that sort of was the advent of modern science. But I really do point to Karl Popper being the father of modern science in the way that he took fallibility and falsifiability and used them to sort of say, okay, how can we use induction and how can we keep relying on induction even though we don't know it's going to continue to work? And that is falsifiability. As soon as it stops working, we say, hey, this has been falsified. But it's really important to understand that in order to be scientific theory and be taught in a school, you need to be able to overcome some sort of falsifiability criteria. And keep in mind, we didn't just not be able to test falsifiability for the creationist hypothesis. We weren't even told what the criteria could possibly be. And that's because it doesn't exist. And that is why it's not science. Thank you.
Mark, thank you very much for that concluding statement. Brian Lauer, I will reset the timer, and you also have 5 minutes for a concluding statement. I will start the timer now. Go ahead.
Okay, well, he talks about the light problem. They got their own light problem. It's called the horizon problem. And you can share my screen right now. Is it working? Or do I have to share it?
Yes, it is working.
Okay.
Yep, you're good.
All right. Basically, science, it says it's testable. This is the textbook definition. And what I want people to go through, watch this thing again and see what's testable and what's not. Are we talking about a verifiable piece of information? Mark and I, we got the same information, but there's our conclusions are what we're discussing, and that's okay. And then we have to look at, was this high confidence or low confidence? And I think I think in school, we should teach high confidence science evidence, not low confidence belief systems. And and as you watch this, is this blind chance or is this creation?
The blue molecule racing along the DNA is reading the gene. It's unzipping the double helix and copying one of the two strands. The yellow chain snaking out of the top is a copy of the genetic message, and it's made of a close chemical cousin of DNA called RNA. The building blocks to make the RNA enter through an intake hole. They are matched to the DNA, letter by letter, to copy the A's, C's, T's, and G's of the gene. You are watching this process called transcription in real time. It's happening right now in almost every cell in your body.
So my question is that blind chance or does that look for a creator? So I guess I'm excited right now because there's more evidence against evolution than ever before. And this information is more accessible than ever before. And this information is broken into bite-sized, understandable pieces like never before. And you can take a screenshots. These are some really good websites that I think you would enjoy. And then just find out, what's the blind chance perspective? It's based on basically imagination and fiction. Where did matter come from? How did life begin? I don't know. And there's a bunch of errors in the textbooks. That's on another talk. And then the rescuing devices in the blind chance perspective is we see comets, but they can't last millions of years. So let's imagine an Oort cloud. We live in a perfectly tuned universe, which is kind of impossible if there's only one. So they imagine a multiverse of billions of universes, and we just happen to be in the right one. We got a magnetic field of 1,400 years. The half-life is 1,400 years. That can't go back millions of years. They invent a dynamo. And then we got spiral galaxies out there that'll wind up in millions of years. They imagine dark matter. And then our universe is expanding at an accelerating rate, and they can't explain it. So they imagine dark energy. And we got the dinosaur soft tissue, and they're going to imagine that they imagine something someday. And then they got wrong predictions. They were wrong about vestigial organs. They were wrong about DNA. They were wrong about young galaxies. They were wrong about forcibly sterilizing people 100 years ago. And there's a lot of frauds in their history. Haeckel's drawings, Piltdown Man, Nebraska Man, Orsa Man. And that's one perspective that's being taught. And I suggest if you're going to teach one, teach another belief system. And this would be the creation perspective. And there's, things 6,000 years found in astronomy. Look at the Russell Humphreys. He accurately predicted the magnetic fields of Uranus and Neptune. He also accurately predicted the diffusion rate of helium, zircons. And also Ann Gibbons talks about a mitochondria Eve would be a mere 6,000 years old. And there's accurate predictions. I encourage people to check out the hydroplate theory. They predicted that there'd be material forged in extreme heat found in comets and asteroids, and they were right. They'd find salt water under major mountain ranges, and they were right. They predicted rounded rocks in asteroids and boulders, and they were right with Comet 67P. Some comets may have moons, and they were right. They were found salt on Mars, and they were right. Asteroids are rock piles, and they were right. And there's carbon-14 in old bones. And they'll say it's contamination. Well, yeah, there's a lot of imagination involved. And so that's basically all I want people to do is get all the information and think for yourself. I'll put this thing back up, take a screenshot, go in there, get some more information. Don't let this just be a one-night thing. Get some more information so you have a really good informed decision. And if we're going to teach one belief system in school, we should teach the other belief system. My position is just teach high confidence science. Don't teach belief systems about the past. A professor, praise his heart, praise God to him. He gave me 15 minutes in his classroom. I was done in 10. And he said, well, what would you do if you were a king of science? And I said, I would put all the theories on the table and point at what's making the accurate predictions and work on that one or ones. Okay. And then I said, I won't teach belief systems about the past. And a student said, well, do you believe in the Bible or science? And I said, the Bible and science go hand in glove, but the Bible and evolution bang heads because evolution's not science. It's not testable. And another student said, isn't it a shame that question's even asked? And I said, well, I understand why it's asked. You aren't being taught the origins of science. They were all Christians, And then I told them about Matthew Murray and Washington Carver. And basically, it's a shame that we're excluding it. We're excluding the only answer that really makes sense for DNA. They won't let a designer in the door. And that's hurting science. Now we've got junk DNA, and they were wrong about that.
10 seconds left.
Okay. Yeah. And so I just encourage people, get all the information, be very skeptical about what I say, be very skeptical about what Mark says, and for really sure, be very skeptical about what the government says. That's what we really have to be skeptical about. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Brian Lauer. Gentlemen, that concludes an engaging debate. I really enjoyed it. Creation versus evolution, the proper perspective of the past. We discussed numerous topics. I believe it was comprehensive, and we still have a lot of audience questions to get to. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how you gentlemen are going to engage these questions. I think just glancing at them, we got a pretty good mix of questions for the both of you. Therefore, let's do this. What we usually do, whoever the question's for, let's say it's for you, Mark, you get to respond first, of course. The question's for you. We give the floor to Brian. Brian, you can give your thoughts, a rebuttal if you'd like to, but then we would throw it back to Mark for the last word. So whoever the question's for gets the last word. Okay, let's start right at the beginning here. We've got creationist crybaby in the house. CC, good to have you. And he's got a super chat question here. I do appreciate the support there, CC. And it's a question for you, Brian. He's coming at you, I think. $5 super chat. Thanks again. Brian Lauer, dating data from radioactive decay, ice cores, dendrochronology, and index fossils corroborate one another. What corroborates Genesis genealogy?
Well, I would point out that his premise is wrong. When they know the age of the rock, the radiometric decay does not work. And when they do ice cores, that didn't work with, they just searched this, what was it called? Lost Squadron. It was they thought they'd go up there and they thought they'd dust it off, and it was under meters and like hundreds of feet of ice. There's hundreds of ice rings there, and it wasn't hundreds of years old. And then the index fossils, check out the coelacanth. That was the index fossil for the dinosaurs, and it's still alive. Okay, what corroborates Genesis? What corroborates that Genesis? I would say a worldwide flood. You look around, you see layers of sedimentary rock that are worldwide. They had to be laid down at the worldwide flood. And then you also look at the fossils. That's evidence of the flood. And then also, the evidence, and then biology. You know, it says everything produces after their kind. That's what the Bible says about biology. And that's what we see in real life. And that's what we see in the fossil record. We have all these explosions. Okay. And then also astronomy. God made it. You know, whenever they send up he made the stars also. That's what it says. And whenever they do the James Webb Space Telescope or the Hubble Deep Field Image, they're always shocked at what they find. They expect to find infant galaxies, population 3 stars, and they never find them. And then anthropology, it's the Tower of Babel. That's where we get the languages. And how does language evolve? It seems like the farther back we go, the more complex it is. It's like our languages are devolving. Just look at your text messages. And so Genesis, I think, speaks strongly for a creator. And I hope that I answered the question properly.
Thank you, Brian. Mark, over to you. The floor is yours.
Oh, I love the Lost Squadron. So that's something that's brought up. I love ice cores. They go back so far, like 800,000 years, I think was the last one. I could be wrong on that. But anyway, a long, long time back, they always bring up the Lost Squadron. Lost Squadron was on an active glacier. The ice cores they're talking about is from a non-active glacier in Antarctica. It's not even remotely the same. So active glaciers are ones that recede and go forward, and that's why the squadron was under there. But it is such a common trope. I feel like having a bingo card for it. It's fantastic because it's like, yep, you do not understand what they're doing in Antarctica. Dendrochronology is tree rings, of course, radioactive decay. Again, this is sort of brings up the heat problem where radioactive decay would throw out alpha and beta particles that would heat up so much that the Earth would be a molten rock. No, all of this is fantastic. I think that you sort of, when you talk about what confirms Genesis genealogy, like the flood, we don't think the flood happened. We know where floods happen. We've got the Missoula floodplains. There's evidence of flood there. It doesn't happen worldwide. There's other civilizations like Egypt, which have gone totally fine throughout this flood without even mentioning it, which is kind of strange. Japanese civilization did the same. So yeah, big shout out to Crybaby. What a beautiful baby. What an awesome person. Love you a lot.
Thank you, Mark. Brian, the question was for you, therefore you get the last word. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would suggest that he check out Mount St. Helens. You know, that came out at 340,000 to 2.8 million, that lava dome. So that one didn't work. And there's other ones that in Hawaii, they got that one wrong. It's like when we know the amount of the date that when it went up, we get wrong ages. So why should we think that it works when we don't know the age of the date? And then you can check out Skull 1470 and the KBS Tuft. They had it dated at millions of years, 200 million years. And then they find this skull underneath. It's like, oh, that breaks our paradigm here. So they had to redate it again and again and again until they finally used the pigs. And it's like, well, this doesn't work. Let's use the pig fossil and that'll date it. So just go into ICR, and I think it's called the pig's habit or something like that. But yeah, there's two positions. One's a blind chance perspective, and they think that, you know, each layer, each ice ring is 1 year, and it's just warmer, colder. That's all it is. And then tree ring dating, they've found that there's more than one ring per year at times. And so, yeah, it's basically it all starts with our belief system. Do we believe in blind chance or creation? We'll find the stuff that we're looking at for. And I just encourage people to what makes the most sense. Was it designed or was it created?
Thank you for that last response there, Brian. Okay, now we've got one for you, Mark. Why ask why Budgery, $5 super chat. Appreciate the support. For Mark, Apollo 14 in 1971 found 19-pound Big Bertha on the lunar surface. When NASA tested it, they determined it came from Earth's mantle. Yeah, I guess it's more of a comment. Mark, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so I'm not really that familiar with it, but it wouldn't be unexpected. So if you don't believe that, you know, some sort of divine being magicked the moon into existence, really what we believe is that another body hit the Earth. I believe, I'm trying to remember the name of it. Was it Thesis, something like that? I can't remember the exact name of it. But anyway, it caused a chunk of the Earth to basically be shot out and become the moon. But this was millions and millions and millions of years ago, or possibly billions of years ago. So, this is what they found, that it was part of Earth's mantle, but that doesn't mean that it got from Earth to there. It was there when the Earth formed. So, then I don't think they're saying, hey, this somehow achieved, orbital velocity and then hit the moon. They're saying, hey, it was a part of the Earth that was knocked off in the very early stages of development. What was the name of that thing? Was it Thesis? Sorry, I'll look up what it is. But that's not unexpected.
Thank you, Mark. Brian, floor is yours.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the name of it is, but in our textbook, it says the Earth's oldest rock was discovered in 2008 near Hudson Bay, where NASA says in 2019, January 24th, 2019, Earth's oldest rock found on the moon. So that textbook is clearly wrong. And in the article, it says the rock crystallized about 20 kilometers beneath Earth's surface. So how do you get 12 miles beneath the Earth's surface onto the moon? And the hydroplate theory explains that perfectly. And why are the mass compressions? There's the near side of the moon is where all the volcanic activity and lava is. The lava flows. The near side's been pounded, and that's counterintuitive because the Earth protects the near side. And I would suggest that's because the stuff came from the Earth, and the hydroplate theory explains it logically. And I encourage people to look into it. Even Mark, take a look into it and see, get all the information, and then come to your own conclusion.
Thank you, Brian. Mark, you get the last word. The question was for you. Go ahead.
So the hydroplate, I don't know where he got that the near side has more craters, because it has significantly more craters on the far side. But we don't think that's because of any kind of the Earth being in the way. We think it's because of the way that the moon is, that
I said lava flows. I said lava flows on the near side. It's been pounded on the near side. The craters are on the other side, but the lava flows on the near side.
Yes, so we think the lava flows is covering up. We think it's about equal. But this whole thing about this shotgun from the Earth of rock up there, that would it would destroy the Earth. We know that didn't happen because the forces involved would absolutely just catastrophically destroy the Earth. Like, it cannot happen. Nobody, working in that field thinks that it happened. And it seems really weird to claim that it happened without any kind of evidence that it happened. Just, it's in a book. The whole idea is, yes, the oldest Earth rock is on the moon because, as I said, it was Theia that hit it. And I did have to look that up. I must admit that, hand up. But it basically knocked a part of the Earth out. So yes, we would expect that to be the oldest part of the Earth, because the Earth was in development when it was knocked and then formed under the effect of gravity into the moon. And that is the explanation. And it completely aligns with why it is really old. It's because it got up there when the Earth was really old, not when some hydro shotgun shot it up there from the Earth. I mean, that it sounds ridiculous even as I'm saying it.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen, for those responses. Next one comes in from Sydney Raptor. Sydney, thank you for the question. And it looks like it's a question for you, Brian. Can Brian please explain his gross error? Red blood cells found in Mary Schweitzer's fossils, and that is a fact. Heme is a component of hemoglobin, a component of red blood cells. Brian, any thoughts on that?
So you're saying we can't trust Nova? I mean, I was quoting Nova. I mean, you can look at the thing if you want. I was quoting Nova, and that's what they said. There was red blood cells and red blood vessels. So does that mean Nova's unreliable? I mean, I can show you if you share my screen, this is what I'm quoting. They're the ones who are saying it. And so I'm assuming they know what they're saying, and they're putting a lot of my tax money into this show. I hope they know what they're saying. So, but are they lying to us about blood cells, blood vessels, and red blood cells? Is that what we should learn from this?
Thank you, Brian. Mark, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, so basically when the sort of they report they find structures of red blood cells, they're really talking about the heme here, the actual one of the smaller structures inside of it. So I think what Sydney's pointing out is they did not find complete blood cells. They found one element of it, which they're actually correct. So when you're sort of reading this, if you go, well, they found some of the delicate structures of red blood cells, they may not mean the entire red blood cells. And when doing investigation like this, reading pop sort of science is fine, but it's probably best to go and read the paper and understand what she's actually saying.
Well,
but yeah, I think Sydney is correct.
If you read the article, the person said, can you believe you got red blood cells? And she just got goosebumps because she knows they can't last, but that's what they found over and over again. And again, I can show you those videos. You can see the stuff stretching. And then she said to to Jack Horner, that's her boss. She said, I found red blood cells. And he said, can you prove they're not red blood cells? Because he knew what that would do. And so he didn't want to go over the science went. And so Bob Enyart called him up, and you can listen to this on rsr.org and search Horner, and you can listen to the conversation between Bob and Jack. And Bob said, I'll give you $20,000 if you carbon date that bone. And Jack wouldn't do it. He said, no, that's not going to help. It's like, help what, Jack? Science progress? Jack said, we wouldn't expect to find, C14 in here because it's so old. And Bob said, yeah, I know, but we wouldn't expect to find blood cells in there either. And so there was, he was not excited. He said it's not going to help. And my question is, what, help science go wherever it goes, or help evolution? Because it seems like, if you find, maybe he knows what happened to Mark Armitage. You find something that goes against the geologic column, you could get fired. That's happened to Mark. And so maybe he sees that writing, but I don't know. So again, this is what the science journals were saying, and this is what Mary was saying, and these are what the interviews are saying. And so, now they find dinosaur nerves, which certainly can't last millions of years. I've seen them with my own eyes. And it's his pictures, Mark's pictures on microscopy today. And I had posters of that up at St. Cloud State, and they stole them, two of them. So there's censorship going on. And my position is give people all the information and let them think. What's happening in our classrooms is they only get a blind chance perspective. So people just memorize. I want people to think. I think we need a thinking population, not a memorizing population.
Thank you, gentlemen. Next question comes in from Katrina Cook. Katrina, thank you very much for the question. And it's a question for you, Mark. How would you falsify hippopotamus to whale evolution, given no direct observation or testing can be conducted on this transformation?
Well, for a start, Katrina, hippopotamuses didn't evolve into whales. They shared a common ancestor. If we found that they didn't fit into the nested hierarchy of evolution, right? If we found that one was sort of completely outside of the norm, yet we do have a sort of a direct line that we can trace from fossil evidence down, well, that would be a sure sign. But we would say, hey, whales and hippopotamuses didn't share a common ancestor. We could do that by genetics, but every time we've checked, the genetics has lined up and been really, really, really accurate, as well as endogenous retroviruses, which is a bit of a long topic to cover here, but that will show a nested hierarchy through the animals as well. So we could definitely falsify that, absolutely. But please understand that hippopotamuses didn't evolve into whales, okay? They didn't. They share a common ancestor and they both branched out, okay, like way back. So please understand that.
Thank you, Mark. Brian, the floor is yours.
Yeah, you're actually right. That's what our textbook says, that the humpback whale is actually more closely related to hippos. And it says millions of years of mutations and change has given rise to both species from a common ancestor. Okay, now is that high confidence evidence or is that low confidence evidence? And I want people to start looking at what is high confidence. Yeah, whales exist and hippos exist, and there's a lot of imagination. And according to my textbook, that's not science. That's not testable. So just make sure you understand when you're being taught science and when you're being taught fiction, I know I met a science instructor, and he'd always have his students write down fuzzy words like might have, could have, probably, somehow. So then the kids know. And when you see millions of years, throw that in there too. It's a belief system. That's not science.
Mark, you get the last word. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's not just saying, hey, we're going to look at, make this thing up and just subscribe to it. There's also, aside from the genetic evidence, which I went through, and endogenous retroviruses, which are retro-transposed into the genetic code and then shared between organisms, and they follow this pattern of nested hierarchy, we also have homologous structures, ones that are shared between the two. They are very, very similar. So, sort of part of their fat structure, part of their body structure is actually incredibly similar. So it is that we didn't have the genetics first. We said, hey, they look incredibly similar and seem to have these traits in common. They're probably related a lot closer than what we ordinarily think, even though one, obviously has flippers and a tail and one doesn't. And then found the genetics back that up. So that's the testable prediction. And falsifying it would have been, hey, the genetics in no way match. The ERVs are completely different, but they're not. So that's how we know.
Thank you for the last word, Mark. Okay, next question. We've got another one from Creationist Crybaby. And it's a good question because this topic was brought up several times during the debate. But if I remember correctly, you guys did not directly engage it. And so, Brian, here's a question for you.
Is that a question to Mark, or was that a question to me? Do I get the last comment?
Oh, the last one was a question for Mark, if I remember correctly.
I thought it was to me.
No, Katrina Cook, question for Mark.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
I think this one's for me as well.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll start with you then, Mark. Creationist Crybaby. I assume your questions are always for the creationists. So this time around, it goes to Mark. Mark, humans and chimps have thousands of ERVs or endogenous retroviruses in common, the same type of ERV at the same location in the genome. Explain from the evolution perspective.
Yeah, so ERVs are basically viruses that have transposed their genetic sequence into our DNA. Now, we know that this occurs in a germline, in an egg or a sperm, because instead of being at random parts in different cells of our body, they're all in the same place on the same cell, which means that it hasn't been transmitted through your body. It occurred when you were first, when the egg first came out, it was infected. Now, these are common, and they have selection sites, but they can be really anywhere in the genome. So they have preferred insertion points, but they can be anywhere. These are the same, but over organisms, which means that the chances of the same virus being inserted in the same place on the genome through every single cell in the body is absolutely impossible. The only way this could happen is if we had a common ancestor. That is the only plausible explanation. And it has been said that endogenous retroviruses are kind of the nail in the coffin of sort of different, like separate ancestry. We share some of them with fish. We share some of them with other animals. We share some of them with mammals. We share some of, and the funny thing is that the more you get towards the closeness in genetics, us and another animal or another creature is, another organism is, the more you get of these in the nested hierarchy pattern. So they actually follow what we would expect from evolution if evolution is true.
Thank you, Mark. Brian, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Okay. And you got that. That's a blind chance perspective, and that's what they come up with. But what do we know? What's high confidence? We know there's ERVs there. We know that. How they got there is low confidence. And another way to think about it is they were designed there. Instead of a common ancestor, it was a common designer, because these ERVs, and this is according, you can check this out at ICR, Dr. Tompkins' viral genome junk hits the trash, because some of these sections of virus-like DNA were shown to have functions. And then some of the functions were placenta development. And it's hard to get births without placentas. So these were probably designed right at the get-go for anybody who had a placenta. And they were also good. They're also used in gene regulation, and they're also used in immune suppression. And so it's like, it kind of reminds me of junk DNA, where they're making all these fabulous claims about junk DNA and being fabulously wrong over time. And it kind of reminds me of that. But if ERVs have functions, I would suggest that they were designed there, not by blind chance, which, and that's what happens when you reject a designer. You have to imagine all these things happening at once. And I think, people should be able to at least talk about a designer. I mean, that's a possibility. Why is that excluded from class?
Thank you, Brian. Mark, you get the last word. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is a funny thing. When something looks like something, creationists will say, hey, it is that thing. But when we see ERVs being retro-transposed into the DNA, when we see all of this happening, and this has the exact hallmarks of retroviruses act exactly the same, and we have seen these viruses co-opted for a benefit. For instance, the HIV virus has been co-opted to provide immunity to other diseases because we can then use it. So in some cases, it's really beneficial to have this kind of information written into your DNA, because it provides some sort of benefit. And there's tons of papers on this explaining how it works. It really is just they want to ignore. So we don't say it shouldn't have any function. It should have function. That nobody said that. It is a straw man by the creationists say, oh, they didn't think it had function. No, we're aware it has a lot of function. We're absolutely aware, because if it was transposed in there and it didn't have any function, it wouldn't survive. It wouldn't be selected for by natural selection. So it makes so much sense that these have been co-opted for some kind of functionality. And that is how it's explained. Now, it's not blind chance. It is chance that the virus got inserted, but most of the time the organism just dies. It is that blind chance. Well, maybe that the ones that are selected, it is deterministic. If it does something really good, like prevents you from getting certain viruses, you may hold on to it, and it may be fixed within a population. It may be spread around and fixed into a population. So then the entire population has this benefit. That is co-option of retroviruses for our benefit. It's a very well understood process. Read some papers on it. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, for interacting with Creationist Crybaby's question and that topic. Next question comes in for Brian from Dustin Buck. $10 super chat. Thank you very much for the support, Dustin. To Brian, if there are so many common retroviruses between chimpanzees and humans, then why do organs from chimpanzees get rejected where pigs are accepted?
That is a good question. And that's beyond my pay range. I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Thank you, Brian. Mark, anything you would like to contribute there?
Oh yeah, I'm not sure like that. I don't think pigs are just automatically accepted. We've got to pump people through anti-immunity, like some immune suppressants, because anybody's, like, you can have a transfer from person to person. It has to be someone very close to your genetic makeup, or else it will get rejected, and that's human to human. You need to have immunosuppressants so your immune system doesn't go, oh well, that's a foreign body, let's get rid of it. That is what organ rejection is. So it isn't that all pigs are accepted. That's not the case. And I don't know where he's getting the idea that, hey, we like chimpanzee organs for some reason. It's very wild, but it doesn't really have much to do with common retroviruses as the genetic match to the recipient. And that holds true for humans as well. They don't go, hey, we'll just grab anybody off the street. They want to find a genetic match for you, because the chances of your body rejecting it is a lot less. And even so, we still need to pump people full of immunosuppressants so they don't reject the organ. So really all you're talking about, Dustin, is, hey, 2 animals are rejected. Why don't we use chimpanzee ones? Because chimpanzees are a lot harder to come by than pigs. That's basically it.
Thank you, Mark. Brian, you get the last word if there's anything you'd like to add.
Yeah, I would like to thank Dustin for the question, and I apologize I didn't give you your money's worth. I'm sorry about that.
Well,
Mark gave you a good money's worth. So
I like to think that I made up.
I think you did, Mark.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I see that as a team effort. Mark and Brian coming together to give Dustin Buck his money worth. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, good thing Mark's here.
Redefine Living has a super chat question. Appreciate it there. Sam, $5 super chat question for Mark. How is the field of biomimicry consistent with your incredulity of biological design?
Well, it's not just incredulity. We see changes in camouflage and mimicry occur all the time. I think there was a pepper moth that changed color because coal plants turned the trees a darker color, so only the ones with a darker color survived. Biomimicry has to be a mimicry of something in their environment that has occurred over a very, very long period of time. And if something looks like, say, an insect looks like a stick, it gets eaten less often. If it's a bit thinner and it looks a bit more stick-like, it gets eaten a lot less. And then that is selected for. It's simply natural selection, that if it can pretend to be something else, then it will survive more often. It survives more often, passes its genes on, it will more and more get to look like that other thing. It's not like you're basically saying, hey, it has to be designed that way, and you haven't actually shown that. You've just claimed it, whereas evolution can do exactly the same thing.
Thank you, Mark. Brian, over to you.
I think it was an excellent question. Biomimicry means we look at nature and then we make designs from nature. Like the bullet planes, the bullet trains in Japan, they used to come out of tunnels and make a sonic boom. And then this guy saw a bird called a fisher diving into the water, and it didn't make a splash. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So they designed the bullet train with the nose of a bird on it, the fisher, and now it doesn't make the sonic boom anymore. And they got Velcro from cockleburrs, and they've got glue from slugs, and they've also made some good flight adjustments based on bird feathers coming in for a landing. And also in that like a hawk, it'll have a thing in his nose so it can go really fast and still breathe. They got that in front of some of those jet fighters, in front of those engines. So it's basically a way of looking at nature and saying, man, that's a neat design, and then we copy it. That's biomimicry. And if it's designed, it's good. It's so good that we copy it, man. That's an incredible argument for a designer, I would think.
Thank you, Brian. Mark, you get the last word. Go ahead.
Oh, maybe I misunderstood the sort of field you were talking about. I really thought you were talking about mimicking other organisms. Well, I'll say for this, I do know that the most efficient means of travel, a means of sort of moving ourselves around, is actually the bicycle. But there doesn't seem to be a bicycle-shaped organism anywhere in nature. So we certainly haven't copied that from nature. And that's sort of, I can't remember the energy efficient. It's like 90-something% energy efficient. You won't find a more efficient energy transfer than a common bicycle. So there are things that we didn't copy from nature as well. So, because natural selection chooses the most efficient forms in order to do it, it's unsurprising that we can copy it from nature, and it's got a few billion years on us. So it's not surprising that if something works essentially in its environment, it will be selected for. We're simply using that to our advantage by saying, hey, that works really well in that environment. I don't think it's this sort of gotcha for design that you think it is.
Thank you, Mark, for that last word. Next question comes in from Christian for Brian Lauer. Why is the Grand Canyon narrowest at the bottom and widest at the top? Brian, one of your favorite topics?
I love the Grand Canyon. Love the Grand Canyon. That little river didn't cut that canyon. The key to Grand Canyon is bulging and cracking 3 times. And the way Grand Canyon is there and not everywhere else in the world is because there was these 2 huge lakes up on the Colorado Plateau. And those lakes, they when they breached, they cut a canyon down. They removed all the sediment, made this V, moved thousands of feet off of this Kaibab limestone, so there's nothing pushing down on it. So it bulged and it cracked, and that's how it. And then it went down and it undercut Hopi Lake. So now you got 2 lakes catastrophically draining over that whole area, moving 1,000 feet over tens of thousands of miles, gone. So there's nothing pushing down on that. So that whole Kaibab Plateau rises up and cracks. So then the river runs through the crack instead of going around it where it's lower, but it runs through the crack and cuts out 800 cubic miles of the Grand Canyon. And pretty soon there's nothing pushing down on Grand Canyon. So the basement rock bulges and cracks, and the river runs through the inner gorge. The river should have got wider there because it should have got wider into the softer sediment, but it cut deeper into the inner gorge at 1,200 feet. And so that's how come it's that little river and it's that huge canyon. And so, yeah, that's why the little river is there and the canyon's 10 miles wide. That's why.
Thank you, Brian. Mark, over to you.
Yeah, it's just erosion. It cut through. It got deeper and deeper. The top layer is a lot softer, so it was eroded away, and basically the bottom parts, which are harder, didn't get eroded. But the weird thing about the Grand Canyon is that for something that was done so quickly, it's very strange to imagine how the switchbacks were done. If that was carved by high pressure water, how will they actually switch back on one another and go in the opposite direction? I don't understand how that's supposed to happen, except by hydraulic erosion by the river and then mechanical erosion of the sediment on the top and the softer rock on the top by winds. That's basically it.
Okay.
Brian, you get the last word.
Well, if the river cut the canyon, what cut the side canyons? They're just as deep and they don't have a river. And why did that river cut down into that hard crystalline rock instead of getting wider? And if that little river cut that canyon over millions of years, where's the delta? 800 cubic miles were taken out of there. And before that, you had to have 2,000 cubic miles taken off of the top of that. Where's all that dirt? And so that little river, there's no way that little river. And then why did that river can't flow uphill? Because it flows into that canyon at about 3,100 feet and it flows out at about 1,200 feet. And in the middle, there's a canyon that's a mile high. Rivers don't flow uphill to cut canyons. And if that Kaibab Plateau held back a big lake, what Answers in Genesis says, why didn't it flow around the top or the bottom of it? Because it's lower there, but it goes right through. And so there's no way that little river cut that big canyon. There's just no way. There's too many things. There's a pothole on a 2,000-foot cliff on Echo Cliffs that's 4 miles from the river, and it's 3,300 feet above the river. How do you get water going that fast, that far from the river? And it fits perfectly with the hydroplate theory. So great question.
Thank you, Brian. And I think what we'll do is one last question here, as we are now over the 30-minute mark on the Q&A, and wrap things up. It's been a fantastic debate and event here tonight, Mark and Brian. And so the last question that we've got time to get to is for Mark, comes in from Stephen Tibbetts. Question: if having the food and air tubes cross is considered a design flaw for choking, how else would you allow for talking?
Well, I'm not sure how talking came into it because it's food, like it's respiration and sort of ingestion of food. So I don't know how talking, like, I'm not sure if you talk your food down. It seems very strange. Anyway, okay, allow for talking. There's a number of ways that animals and other organisms communicate with each other. We could use clicks, we could use pheromones, we could use all kinds of things. There's all kinds of wonderful ways for communication to happen. But food and air, just like for a design flaw, you would like to have something that stops you from inhaling when there's food in your mouth. It is a bit of a sloppy design that you can inhale your food and end up dying from, sheer design flaw, essentially. Just saying.
Thank you, Mark. Brian, any thoughts?
Well, I think it's an incredible design that we got one tube instead of two. Could you imagine if there were two tubes in there and you turn your neck, you're going to pinch one of them? I think it's an incredible design. I think it was an optimum, and it's very sophisticated. And choking to death on food is, that happens. That's true, but we're in a fallen world. And so, I think it's an incredible design, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
Mark, last word.
Yeah, so this is the problem with having a sort of unfalsifiable hypothesis. It's basically any sort of argument that you raise. They say, well, it's a fallen world. You know, it's perfect design, but a fallen world, and that's sort of this escape mechanism, this rescue device, if you will, that sort of says, hey, everything's perfect, designed by a perfect creator, and you point to all kinds of things that work well. But every time that somebody brought up something that's not worked well, you blame something else on it. So it doesn't actually have any kind of falsifiability criteria, which is why it's not a science, because always a rescue device is parachuted in to make sure that the falsification criteria is never actually met. And that's why it's not a science.
Thank you, Mark. And gentlemen, that was an excellent Q&A. Every session for tonight's debate has been great. I really enjoyed it. I do appreciate the time, as always, that you gentlemen give us here for these debates, Mark Reed and Brian Lauer. And so I hope you both had as much fun as I did, and also as much fun as the audience did, as we had some great audience interaction with some excellent questions to help us expand on tonight's topic. Mark, Brian, let's get some quick final words and final thoughts for tonight. Again, I really do appreciate you guys doing this. Mark, let's start with you. It was great to have you back. Let's hand it to you for some final words, final thoughts.
Yeah, I'd really like to thank Brian for being here and sort of providing the opposition, and Donnie for hosting, of course. And thank you for spending your time with us here. I recently did a 7-hour debate, which was, quite frankly, hell. I'm sorry if that offends people, but it really was nasty. So I really appreciate coming back on Standing to Truth, where you know, you have respectful dialogue. And you know, Brian, you're new to the debate scene. That's totally fine. You know, you did a great job, and I really appreciate it. Look, I can't say that I don't believe that a God exists, but I can't rule it out, because it is one of those untouchable things. It is one of those things that I can't investigate, which is why I don't think it should be in the science classroom. We can at least investigate other things. Now, if there was a reliable methodology, and I really want to stress methodologies here, a way to actually put up whether something is or something isn't, have some sort of thing to be met so we can say, hey, this does or does not exist, then I would be all for it. But we don't have that. So I think maybe the priority is finding some kind of reliable way to test the supernatural that produces consistent results, not only on the God, but also on, you know, other people's gods and other supernatural things that people claim is out there. Because if you can't do that, then it will never reach something that is scientific. I'm sorry, it just won't. But again, I want to thank you so much. I had a blast. It was been fantastic. And yeah, I'll wrap it up there.
Mark, thank you very much. 7-hour debate. That's impressive. That's quite some endurance right there. You've definitely
Don't do it. It's a trap. Don't do it.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you found tonight to be professional and also enjoyable. So that's what we want here for our guests. Mark, again, thank you very much for those final words, final thoughts, and for doing this. Brian Lauer, thank you as well for your time leading up to the debate, any kind of prep that was required for the debate, but also the debate itself. Brian, let's hand it to you for some final words, final thoughts.
Well, I thank you, Donnie, for doing this. I think you have a vital function in our society so people can get both sides and think. So that's very vital. And I appreciate Mark to step up to the microphone for this. It's not an easy thing to do, and I appreciate that he did that. And if he wants more, I suggest that he check out on YouTube, what is it called? Discovery Science, their YouTube channel. They've got this stuff called Science Uprising, where it's probably 5 to 7 minutes long, and it talks about scientists who give you some methodological research way to look at science, and they do a very good job. And that's one of my main things. I think people should get good information. One of the fun ones is Long Story Short. They've got a series of stuff that makes real complicated stuff rather entertaining and simple. And I think, again, we have more information against evolution than ever before. And we got more easy access than ever before. But the main thing is there's someday our heart's going to stop. And then what happens? And I just encourage people to search, be skeptical of what the professors say, what I say, what the Bible says, but check it out, because your eternity depends on it. You know, Jesus said, if I've told you earthly things and you believe not, how shall I tell you if I tell you of heavenly things? So basically, Jesus came to die for our sins. And the flood and the fossils are evidence that God judges sin, and there's going to be another judgment. And so what I'm trying to do is get as many people in the lifeboat as possible. I was at St. Cloud State, and a psych major asked me what I was doing there, and I said, if you saw a blind person walking towards a cliff, would you warn them? And he said, yeah, absolutely. And I said, well, that's what I see. I see people who are blinded. They believe the lies of Satan, and they aren't seeing the truth for whatever reason. And if they go off a cliff without Jesus, they're going to spend an eternity in hell. And I don't want that, and God doesn't want that. So if there's anybody listening, I encourage you to think about your eternal destiny. And I encourage you to give Jesus, check out what the Bible says about it, and put your faith in the one who died for your sins. And he says to love your enemies, and bless them that curse you. And I think that the world would be a better place if more people followed what Jesus said.
Brian, thank you very much for those final words and final thoughts. Again, gentlemen, to the both of you, I appreciate you guys giving us a solid debate here on creation versus evolution, the proper perspective of the past. A great way to spend a Saturday night, and if you're in the future like Mark, a Sunday morning. Gentlemen, we are going to let you guys out of here to enjoy the rest of your day or night. Mark, we'll talk to you soon. Brian, we'll talk to you soon as well. Okay, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. That wraps up our proper perspective of the past origins debate showdown between Brian Lauer and Mark Reed. I've been looking forward to this debate, as I do enjoy the energy from Brian and Mark. I knew that they would have a good, stimulating discussion, and they did. The discussion portion alone was over 60 minutes. They had the opportunity to discuss many important topics related to the origins debate. And overall, I just had a lot of fun, and I could tell the audience did as well. We had some great feedback, some excellent questions during the Q&A. And I had a feeling Brian Lauer and Mark Reed, they'd be a good matchup. And so I'm glad that we got them here in the debate Coliseum to engage the topic of creation versus evolution. Now, we are coming close to the end of July. June and July really have flown by. I made sure to do my best to give you guys the summer of debates and to give you guys a good diversity of topics as well to enjoy for the summer. July's been great. June has been great. We've had debates in the world of creation and evolution, of course, debates on the nature of God, soteriology. We've had debates on eschatology. And as a matter of fact, lately we've been having more theology related debates. We don't do as many creation versus evolution debates as we used to, but we have been consistently hosting creation versus evolution debates for 5 years now. So maybe we're running out of, matchups in terms of creation versus evolution. So for those in the world of creation and evolution, if you want to get your feet wet or you want to jump into the debates, Coliseum, reach out to me, standfortruthministries@gmail.com. Let me know a little bit about yourself, and I'll do my best to fit you into the schedule and to match you up with an interlocutor. In terms of creation versus evolution, we do have one of our main events for the summer. This one's coming up at the end of August. I am excited for this. Dr. Zach Hancock and Dr. Jerry Bergman should be a technical debate on an important topic related to ancestry. Can evolution explain the arrival of the fittest? Again, Dr. Zach Hancock and Dr. Jerry Bergman. Matt and I recently, in the world of origins, since we're on that topic, we engaged culture cats, formerly known as conspiracy cats, in a debate seminar. We went for 4.5 hours on the topic of Adam, Eve, and biblical creation. Matt and I were thrilled to have the opportunity to debate culture cats because he's experienced, he's seasoned, he's a true professional, and he's a skilled debater. We had a ton of fun with this debate, probably one of our personal favorite debates in terms of debates that we've done. We've done many debates over the years, with various people on the topic of origins. And so our goal alongside Culture Cats was to give everybody in both the creation and evolution communities a go-to debate on the topic of Adam, Eve, and biblical creation with some of the most up-to-date information and arguments available. And we knew that we would accomplish that by having more of a debate seminar where we have long sessions and a longer debate. So do check that one out. And of course, tonight, the Great Origins Debate Showdown, Brian Lauer versus Mark Reed. Now, in terms of theology, we have a lot. I have figured out that hosting over 450 debates on all sorts of topics, two of the most popular subjects, people love the topics of the nature of God, such as the Trinity, oneness, monarchianism, Unitarianism, anything within the world of the nature of God, and soteriology, which is the study of the doctrines of salvation. Those two subjects, people love those debates. And so I spent a lot of time over the last week filling up the schedule for August and September with debates on the nature of God and also on soteriology. And so we got several every single week for the next couple months. And so just quickly run through those, what we have for everybody is right here, the Great Limited Atonement Debate. Unfortunately, one of the debaters here, we were supposed to do this a couple nights ago, but his power was out all day. And so we rescheduled it for next Thursday. And so the Great Limited Atonement Debate, two experienced debaters, Lucas Curcio and Turton Fan. So this one's coming up at the very end of July. We will be ending July with a bang. We've got this one coming up here soon. It's Free Grace Theology Biblical, Charles Jennings and Jerry Duckworth. Free Grace Theology versus Lordship Salvation, Charles Jennings versus CJ Cox. Two true professionals here. CJ and Charles have engaged in just dozens and dozens of debates. So I'm sure this is going to be an excellent one. We just hosted this marathon of a debate. This was 4.5 hours, but it was worth it. Time flew by. Albiel and Mario Shepard debated Paul, binitarian or Trinitarian. In Redefined Living says SFT, keeping us busy. Yeah, we miss you, brother. You're the award-winning co-host. So great to have you here. And just in general, we had an excellent, fun live chat here tonight. And so what else do we have for you? We got the Great Mark of the Beast debate, Charles Jennings versus Tim from AVBTM. We've got Chris Claus and Stacy Turbeville debating. And guys, this is all, within the next month or two. So we are ending the summer with a bang. We have a lot. August is jam-packed, so get ready, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun ride. Chris Claus and Stacy Turbeville duking it out in the debate Coliseum. We've got Does the Bible Teach Three Persons as the One God? So Trinity Debate Showdown between Chris Claus and Otis Lewis. We've got the highly anticipated round 2 between Caleb Percher and Albial. Does the New Testament teach a unipersonal God? I am looking forward to this one. The Great Once Saved, Always Saved debate, Chris Morrison versus Caleb Percher. This one should be good. All of these debates should be just a lot of fun. And so, guys, that's just overall a sneak preview into what we have scheduled for August, September. I'm also booking events into October and November. Let's not only end the summer with a bang, but also end the year with a bang. That last quarter of the year, I want to make sure we have, again, just a good diversity of debates. And so, okay, I think we are going to, well, firstly, I'll address some of these comments. Stephen Tibbetts says, I really wish you would show who has what position. And so what I make sure to do, this is a good point. What I make sure to do for every single debate that we have here on Standing for Truth is if you click the details box of the YouTube event. So typically when I get a debate confirmed And both debaters I know are good to go for the debate. I'll get a thumbnail ready. My wife helps me with those. And I'll set the event, and in the details box, I'll put the debate resolution. I'll put who's the affirmative, who's the negative, and I'll link the channels of the debaters. And so it's a good point, Stephen. And I do that. Again, do check the details box of every single YouTube event. And typically I'll book events 2, sometimes even 3 months in advance. And so if you go to the upcoming live stream section of the channel, you'll see debates that are a month, 2 months in advance, plenty of time for you to hopefully look over the details there and find out who's taking the affirmative, who's taking the negative, and to see people's respective positions. So again, I appreciate that. Stephen Tibbetts, he says that yes, well, we can implement that. You know, we're always looking for good ideas. Typically what I'll do, and it's not always the case, but I'll try on the left side. I'll have the affirmative with the person on the right with the negative. But, you know, another thing though with thumbnails is you don't want to like overly saturate it, I guess you could say, with text. Sometimes less is more. So we'll see. You know, we'll run that by the board of directors here at Standing for Truth. So, okay, guys, that's it for tonight. It's been a great debate. It's been another excellent week of programs. Next week's no different. We got lots of events. Matt and I will be getting interviewed on Monday. So Monday night by Dr. Alan Walker, I think is his name. And we will be, that'll be at the TCCSA. And so we'll try and get that interview available as soon as possible for people to enjoy. We also did an interview about a month ago with Real Science Radio, and those are supposed to be airing on August 8th. So just a lot to look forward to in August in terms of debates and discussions, but also in terms of interviews and podcasts on various subjects. So good to see everybody here. Jessica B., my award-winning thumbnail maker. So good to have you in the chat. And T-Rock, good to see you as well, brother. Mr. Green, welcome to the team. Mr. Green became a YouTube member. For members, if you go to the video section, Matt and I, we just released, starring Matt, ministry partner here. There's a members-only video. So go have a look at that. It has to do with a conference we just did about a week ago. And we are a listener-supported ministry. So if you appreciate all the work that we're doing and you want to help help us continue doing this full-time, hosting all these debates, discussions, interviews, seminars, so on and so forth, you can support us by becoming a member or by becoming a patron, a Stand for Truth patron. And you can become a patron for as little as $1 a month. And by becoming a patron, you also gain access to just a ton of SFT exclusive content. And so it really does help. And we really do appreciate all the help. As a matter of fact, we have secondary websites, CreatiousClothing.com. We've had new SFT gear just recently drop. And JB Natural Skincare Company, my wife's website here, has a massive summer sale. It's been doing great. What are you waiting for? Massive deals, massive discounts. And so take advantage. Join the club. Check the website, jbnaturalskincare.com, and have a look at the testimonials and the reviews. And you will see that people are loving these products. And of course, the Debate Coliseum. That's where we get out of our echo chambers. We get behind the mics. And that's why I appreciate all debaters here that come onto the channel. I appreciate anybody who's willing to get out of that echo chamber to come together for a discussion or even a debate on issues that we differ on. I think it's important. And I also think it's healthy to provide information from all sides for our audience to hopefully the goal is to analyze that information in an objective manner. Okay, again, I want to thank our debaters, Mark Reed and Brian Lauer, for their time tonight. I really do appreciate them for being willing to engage in this debate. Creation versus evolution. the topic of origins, very important. And Mark and Brian both gave us a debate to remember. Okay, to the audience, thank you so much for tuning in. God bless you all. And we will see you guys first thing next week. As you can tell, we've got a lot to look forward to. God bless you all.